Hello and welcome to the Velvet Past. Tonight we'll discuss the most brutal imperial successions in history to fall asleep. Chapter 1. The bloody ascent of Sulla and Rome's self-inflicted wounds did the very Republic, once the envy of the world, truly tear itself asunder in a brutal dance of power, or did a single man's insatiable ambition unleash a tide of terror, forever scarring the heart of Rome? Our journey now takes us to the tumultuous final decades of the Roman Republic, a period of unprecedented internal strife, where the pursuit of ultimate power transformed into a horrifying saga of proscriptions, purges, and rivers of spilled blood. It was a time when the very traditions of succession were shattered, replaced by the chilling, brutal reality of military might and ruthless vengeance. Our story begins in the 1st century BCE, a century already fraught with political tension and social unrest. The Roman Republic, once built on the ideals of shared power and civic duty, was groaning under the weight of its vast conquests and the ambitions of its most powerful generals. The traditional political mechanisms were failing, unable to contain the rivalries of men who commanded legions rather than simply votes. Into this cauldron of simmering resentment stepped Lucius, Cornelius, Sulla, Felix, a brilliant general, a cunning politician, and a man of uncompromising cruelty. His rivalry with Gaius Marius, another formidable Roman commander, ignited a civil war that would plunge Rome into an abyss of self-destruction. Imagine the atmosphere in Rome, the constant whisper of conspiracy, the sudden, terrifying clang of legionary boots on the cobbled streets, the palpable fear in the Forum. The city, once a symbol of stability, became a hunting ground. When Sulla, after a protracted struggle and a strategic retreat, finally marched his legions on Rome itself, an act almost unthinkable in republican tradition, he shattered centuries of precedent. His first entry was violent, but his second, after defeating Marius's forces, unleashed a reign of terror unlike anything Rome had ever seen. This was the infamous proscriptions. Sulla's innovation was not simply to execute his enemies, but to declare them proscribed, their names publicly posted, their property confiscated, their lives forfeit to anyone who could deliver their head. Imagine the horrifying scene: lists appearing in the Forum, names of senators, equities, and wealthy citizens, often accompanied by bounties. Friends betrayed friends, sons denounced fathers, all driven by fear, greed, or the chilling zeal of moment. The streets of Rome literally ran with blood. Thousands perish, not just political rivals, but anyone deemed disloyal, or simply inconveniently wealthy. Sulla dismantled the Marian party piece by piece, crushing all opposition with a ruthless efficiency that bordered on the grotesque. The chilling atmosphere of Sulla's dictatorship was one of absolute suffocating terror. His rise was not a mere succession, it was a bloody, violent seizure, a tearing apart of the very fabric of Roman society. He aimed to restore the traditional aristocratic order, yet in doing so, he used means so brutal, so unprecedented, that he irrevocably changed Rome forever. He established himself as dictator re publicae, constituende, dictator for the purpose of writing laws and restoring the Republic without any time limit. A shocking move that undermined the very essence of republicanism. His reforms were sweeping, aimed at strengthening the Senate and weakening the tribunes, but they were carved in blood and enforced by fear. The unsettling climax of Sulla's reign was his unprecedented voluntary resignation from the dictatorship. In 79 BCE, he walked away from absolute power, a move that baffled and terrified his contemporaries. Was it a genuine desire to restore the Republic, or a cynical act of calculated political theatre, knowing he had so thoroughly purged the opposition that his legacy would endure? His retirement did not bring peace. Instead, it set a chilling precedent. He had shown future ambitious men, Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, that the path to ultimate power lay not in the Senate, but through the loyalty of legions and the brutal elimination of rivals. The wounds he inflicted on the Republic were self-inflicted, a profound rupture that could never truly heal. And so, as the echoes of Sulla's brutal proscriptions fade into the silence, and the phantom lists of the condemned seem to flicker, in the mind we are left with the haunting legacy of Rome's self-inflicted wounds. His bloody ascent is a stark reminder that the pursuit of absolute power can consume even the noblest of ideals, transforming a republic into a battleground for individual ambition. In the long-forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those proscribed wander the cobbled streets, their fates forever a chilling testament to a time when Rome turned its formidable might upon itself, leaving behind only the profound silence of its shattered traditions. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to tyranny and a chilling enigma of a republic consumed by its own darkest desires. Chapter 2. The assassination of Julius Caesar and the Republic's last breath. Did the mighty dictator truly fall to a noble defense of liberty, his lifeblood spilling onto the Senate floor? Or was his brutal assassination a desperate, misguided act that merely plunged Rome deeper into chaos, extinguishing the Republic's last breath? Our journey now takes us to the very heart of the Roman Republic, to the Ides of March 44 BCE, a day etched into history as a turning point, where the clash of ideals and ambition resulted in a horrifying act of political violence that reverberated through the ages. It was a succession not of throne to heir, but of power from one titan to many, resulting in a profound, bloody vacuum. Our story begins with Gaius Julius Caesar, a man of unparalleled military genius, political cunning, and boundless ambition. After years of civil war against Pompey the Great, Caesar had emerged victorious, dominating the Roman world. He had declared himself dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity, accumulating unprecedented power, undermining republican institutions, and fundamentally reshaping Rome in his image. While adored by the populace and his legions, his autocratic rule ignited fear and resentment among many senators who saw him as a tyrant, a destroyer of the ancient republic's cherished liberties. Imagine the atmosphere in Rome leading up to that fateful day, the palpable tension, the hushed whispers of dissent, the growing unease beneath Caesar's benevolent yet iron grip. Conspiracies, a viper in the heart of power, began to coil. A group of senators, including Brutus and Cassius, self-proclaimed liberators, resolved that Caesar's death was the only way to save the Republic. They believed that by removing the tyrant, they would restore the old order, allowing Rome to breathe free once more. The chilling atmosphere of the assassination unfolded. On March 15th, 44 BCE, in the theatre of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting, Caesar, despite warnings and omens, arrived unarmed. As he sat, the conspirators, perhaps 60 strong, surrounded him. First a signal, then a knife flashed. Publius Cerilius Casca, Longus struck the first blow, a glancing wound to the neck. Caesar fought back, but then, seeing the multitude of his attackers, and reportedly recognizing Brutus among them, he cried out, or merely sighed, "Et tu, Brute, you too, Brutus." The phrase, whether uttered or imagined, became a timeless symbol of profound betrayal. The brutal attack escalated. Knives flashed repeatedly, tearing into his flesh. He fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, his former rival, bleeding from 23 stab wounds. The sight was horrifying. The greatest man in Rome, revered by many as a living god, reduced to a bleeding corpse on the Senate floor. The conspirators, their hands stained with blood, then raised their daggers, proclaiming liberty. But the ensuing chaos was not the rebirth of the republic they had envisioned. Instead, it plunged Rome into another, far more devastating, civil war. The unsettling climax of Caesar's assassination was the profound, unintended consequence of the conspirators' actions. They believed they were restoring liberty, but they had merely created a power vacuum, a bloody chasm into which ambitious men would leap. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir who would become Emperor Augustus, swiftly rose to avenge Caesar's death. Their vengeful pursuit of the liberators led to the Battle of Philippi and the ultimate defeat of Brutus and Cassius. The Republic, far from being saved, was utterly consumed by the ensuing power struggles, finally giving way to the Roman Empire under Octavian. Caesar's assassination, intended to prevent a monarchy, inadvertently paved the way for its inescapable arrival. The violence unleashed upon him was absorbed by the very state, transforming the nature of Roman succession from a political struggle to an imperial decree, often enforced by the legions. And so, as the echoes of Caesar's last breath fade into the silence, and the phantom glint of daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of the Republic's last breath. His brutal assassination is a stark reminder that even the most well-intentioned violence can have profound, unintended consequences, extinguishing not tyranny, but the very system it sought to save. In the long-forgotten nights, did the ghosts of the liberators truly believe they died for freedom? Or were they haunted by the knowledge that their desperate act merely opened the door to an empire, their hopes forever an unsolved enigma, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of murder transformed an empire's destiny? The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to betrayal and a chilling enigma of a republic consumed by its own desperate choices. Chapter 3. The year of the 4 emperors and the cycle of blood did the very heart of the Roman Empire truly devour its own leaders in a relentless, bloody feast of ambition, or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of power unbound, a profound enigma of a throne demanding endless sacrifice? Our journey now takes us to a dark, tumultuous period in Roman history. The infamous year of the 4 emperors, 69 CE. This wasn't merely a political crisis. It was a brutal, rapid-fire succession of rulers, each seizing the imperial purple through military might, only to be swiftly overthrown and violently extinguished, plunging Rome into a terrifying cycle of civil war and imperial murder. Our story begins with the death of Emperor Nero in 68 CE, leaving behind a power vacuum and a deeply fractured empire. His extravagant and tyrannical rule had alienated the Senate, the army, and the populace. The Julio-Claudian dynasty, which had ruled Rome since Augustus, had come to a violent end, leaving no clear successor. Into this desperate void, ambitious generals across the vast empire, sensing weakness, began to stir their legions. Imagine the atmosphere in Rome and its provinces, the constant rumble of distant legions on the march, the sudden arrival of new edicts from shifting imperial centers, the pervasive fear of civil war. The stability that Rome had known for decades dissolved into a terrifying freefall. The imperial throne, once a symbol of stability, became a death trap, beckoning ambitious men only to consume them. The chilling atmosphere of this year unfolded with breathtaking speed. First, Galba, an elderly governor from Hispania, marched on Rome and seized power, quickly proving to be unpopular and fiscally tight-fisted. His reign, meant to bring order, lasted mere months. He was brutally murdered in the Forum by his own Praetorian Guard, his head severed and paraded on a pike, a grim warning of the fragility of power. Next, Otho, a former companion of Nero, bought the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard and declared himself emperor. His ascent was swift and bloody, marked by Galba's demise, but his claim was immediately challenged by Vitellius, commander of the legions in Germania, who marched his formidable forces south. The ensuing battle near Cremona was fierce and devastating. Otho, rather than prolonging the civil war and witnessing further Roman bloodshed, chose the chilling path of suicide. His reign lasted only 3 months. Finally, Vitellius entered Rome, his legions bringing plunder and chaos. He consolidated his power through purges and extravagance, but his grip was tenuous. From the east, a new challenger emerged, Vespasian, a seasoned general who had been suppressing a revolt in Judea, declared himself emperor with the support of the powerful legions of the east. Another brutal civil war erupted, culminating in a second, even more devastating battle near Cremona, where Vitellius's forces were utterly crushed. Vitellius himself was captured in Rome, dragged through the streets, brutally tortured, and finally executed, his body thrown into the Tiber. His reign lasted a mere 8 months. The unsettling climax of the year of the 4 emperors was the profound realization that the imperial purple was no longer a gift of the Senate or an inheritance. It was a prize seized by military might and then violently defended until death. Vespasian, a pragmatic and competent general, finally brought stability, establishing the Flavian dynasty. But the precedent had been set. Power now flowed from the legions, and imperial succession could be bought with blood and steel. The republic's internal conflicts had ended in a dictatorship. Now, the empire's internal conflicts had devolved into a brutal, endless cycle of murder and usurpation. And so, as the echoes of the legion's marching boots fade into the silence, and the phantom glint of 100 daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne bathed in blood. The year of the 4 emperors is a stark reminder that when power is unbound by law or tradition, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with death. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those fallen emperors truly haunt the imperial palace? Their reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and murder, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of a power that consumes its wielders. Chapter 4. The Byzantine Succession and the Eyes of Basil eyed the grand, glittering Byzantine Empire truly tear itself apart, in a relentless dance of blinding and revenge, or did a single emperor's brutal genius unleash a tide of terror, forever scarring the traditions of succession with a chilling, disfiguring vengeance? Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet often brutal, courts of the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, where the pursuit of imperial power was often a horrifying saga of political intrigue, blinding, and the relentless of rivals. It was a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying game of survival, often played out with chilling, mutilating consequences. Our story begins in the 10th and 11th centuries, a period of both flourishing culture and profound internal strife within the Byzantine Empire. The throne, though theoretically passed through dynastic lines, was often a prize seized by powerful generals, ambitious courtiers, or cunning empresses. The traditions of imperial succession were constantly challenged by usurpation, and the methods used to neutralize rivals were often as cruel as they were effective. Among these, blinding was a particularly Byzantine form of political incapacitation. A blind man could not rule, as he could not lead his armies or present himself as a physically perfect emperor. Imagine the atmosphere in the great palace of Constantinople, the constant murmur of conspiracy, the rustle of silken robes concealing daggers, the palpable fear of imperial wrath. The city, a symbol of stability and Christian faith, often became a hunting ground for rival factions. Into this cauldron of simmering ambition stepped Basil II, also known as the Bulgar Slayer, one of the most formidable and brutal emperors of Byzantine history. His reign, from 976 to 1025, was marked by relentless warfare against his enemies, and equally relentless suppression of internal rivals. The chilling atmosphere of Basil II's reign was one of absolute suffocating imperial control, enforced by fear and brutal efficiency. While not solely defining his character, his most infamous act, which profoundly impacted the understanding of Byzantine succession and justice, was his blinding of 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners after the Battle of Kledion in 1014. This was not a direct succession crisis, but a shocking demonstration of imperial power that echoed through his entire rule, total, uncompromising incapacitation of a foe. However, internal power struggles within the Byzantine court were equally brutal. Dynastic rivals, ambitious generals, and scheming eunuchs constantly vied for the throne. The method of neutralizing these threats, often preferred over outright execution, was the political blinding. Imagine the terrified face of a deposed emperor, a defeated general, or a royal prince, being dragged to a chamber where, with a hot iron or a swift blade, his eyes would be put out. The screams, the profound and irreversible loss of sight, the utter dehumanization all served as a chilling warning to others who might harbor imperial ambitions. Figures like Romanos, Ilicarpanos, and his sons, and later Michael VI, were all victims of this terrifying practice. The unsettling climax of Byzantine succession was the profound, brutal precedent set by such acts. It fostered a culture where rivals were not simply removed, but permanently disfigured. Their political viability extinguished by literally extinguishing their sight. The act of blinding ensured they could no longer lead armies, command respect, or even navigate the labyrinthine palace. It was a horrifying, yet merciful alternative to death, ensuring the continuity of the ruling emperor while leaving the vanquished in a living hell. The very tradition of imperial legitimacy became intertwined with the ability to ruthlessly eliminate rivals, leaving a trail of sightless shadows in the wake of ascending power. And so, as the echoes of screams and the chilling hiss of hot irons fade into the silence of the Byzantine palace, and the phantom faces of the blinded linger in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne stained by mutilation. Byzantine succession, with its ritualized blinding, is a stark reminder that the pursuit of absolute power can twist justice into grotesque forms, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with disfigurement in the long, forgotten nights. Did the ghosts of those sightless emperors truly haunt the imperial chambers? there reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession demanded the sacrifice of sight, leaving behind only the profound silence of eternal darkness. The lost eyes speak volumes, a testament to imperial ruthlessness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 5: The War of the Roses and the Bloody. Game of Thrones did the very crown of England truly become a poisoned chalice, passing through a relentless cycle of betrayal and murder, or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of fractured loyalties? A profound enigma of dynastic ambition consuming itself in a bloody, generations-long conflict. Our journey now takes us to the fractured, war-torn landscape of 15th century England, a realm torn asunder by decades of brutal civil war. This wasn't merely a series of battles. It was the War of the Roses, a complex, brutal succession crisis where two powerful dynastic houses, the Lancasters, symbolized by a red rose, and the Yorks, a white rose, engaged in a horrifying, self-destructive dance for the throne, leaving a trail of regicides, vanished princes, and a profound national trauma. Our story begins in 1455, though its roots stretch back to the deposition of Richard II and the usurpation of Henry IV. The Plantagenet dynasty had fractured, and the weakening rule of the pious, but often ineffectual, King Henry VI, a Lancastrian, allowed the ambitions of his powerful cousin, Richard, Duke of York, to blossom. The stage was set for a decades-long struggle that would pit family against family, lord against lord, in a relentless fight for supremacy. Imagine the atmosphere in England, the constant dread of battle, the sudden shifts in allegiance, the pervasive fear of attainder and execution. The great families of the realm, once pillars of stability, became agents of chaos, their loyalties bought by power or extinguished by the sword. The very concept of stable succession dissolved, replaced by the chilling reality of whoever could seize the crown by force, only to have it ripped from their grasp by another. The chilling atmosphere of this conflict unfolded with breathtaking speed and brutality. Battles were frequent and bloody, marked by fierce hand-to-hand combat and immense casualties among the nobility. Victories were fleeting, often reversed by a new claimant, a fresh army, or a sudden betrayal. Kings were deposed, murdered, or mysteriously vanished. Henry VI himself was imprisoned, then briefly restored, then mysteriously died in the Tower of London, likely murdered. Richard of York was killed in battle, his head impaled on a pike. Edward IV, a formidable Yorkist king, seized the throne, but his reign was marked by plots and renewed conflict. The unsettling climax of the War of the Roses was the profound, brutal precedent set by its endless cycle of violence. The culmination of this grim dance came with the rise of Richard III, the last Plantagenet king. His ascent was steeped in controversy, shadowed by the alleged murder of his young nephews, the princes in the Tower, solidifying his reputation as a ruthless usurper. His short, brutal reign ended spectacularly at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, where he was killed in action, the last English king to die in battle. His crown, found famously on a hawthorn bush, was placed upon the head of Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII, ushering in the Tudor dynasty and finally uniting the warring factions through marriage. But the price of this new order was immense. Decades of civil war had decimated the English nobility, left the common people suffering, and ingrained a deep, pervasive fear of renewed conflict. The War of the Roses had shown that succession was not divine right alone, but a bloody, brutal, Game of Thrones, where loyalty was fluid and power was seized by the sword, maintained by terror and lost by betrayal. The traditional succession had dissolved into an agonizing, self-destructive cycle, and so, as the echoes of steel clashing and the whispers of 1,000 betrayals fade into the silence, and the phantom roses of red and white seem to bleed into the landscape, we are left with the haunting legacy of a crown bathed in blood. The War of the Roses is a stark reminder that when dynastic ambition runs wild, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with death. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those fallen kings and vanished princes truly haunt the battlefields and castles? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a nation's trauma. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 6. The Janissary Mutiny and the Sultan's Bloody Hand did the very elite of an empire. The fearsome Janissaries truly become a hydra-headed beast devouring its own masters, or was there relentless? Bloody mutiny, an inevitable consequence of power unbound, a profound enigma of military succession consuming the very throne it swore to protect. Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet often terrifying, courts of the Ottoman Empire, a vast dominion built on conquest and disciplined force. Here, for centuries, the elite infantry corps, the Janissaries, once the very backbone of the Sultan's power, transformed into a formidable political force, often dictating imperial succession through brutal, bloody coups and assassinations. Our story begins in the 15th and 16th centuries, when the Janissaries, originally an elite infantry force comprised of Christian boys conscripted and trained from a young age, the Devium system, were the cutting edge of Ottoman military might. Loyal only to the Sultan, they were fierce, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. They were housed in luxurious barracks, given immense privileges, and enjoyed a unique status within the empire. But over time, their power grew, their ranks became hereditary, and their influence in the imperial court became undeniable. They began to see themselves not merely as soldiers, but as kingmakers. Imagine the atmosphere in Constantinople, the constant murmur of whispers from the Janissary barracks, the palpable tension in the Topkapi Palace, the pervasive fear of their unpredictable wrath. The Sultan's throne, though seemingly absolute, often rested on the precarious balance of Janissary loyalty. When they disapproved of a new sultan, or when promised bonuses for a new ascension were not forthcoming, they would riot, mutiny, and demand change, often with brutal efficiency. The chilling atmosphere of their mutinies unfolded with terrifying regularity. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, the Janissaries engaged in numerous revolts, often deposing and even assassinating sultans who dared to cross them. The Ottoman's tower in the Topkapi Palace became a notorious prison for deposed rulers. Sultan Osman II, in 1622, attempting to curb their power, was captured, imprisoned, and brutally murdered by his own Janissaries, becoming the first Ottoman sultan to be openly killed by his subjects. His demise was a stark, horrifying warning. The true power now lay with the elite corps. The unsettling climax of the Janissaries' influence was the profound, brutal precedent set by their relentless interference in succession. They became a law unto themselves, a state within a state, able to dictate who sat on the throne, when wars were fought, and how the empire was governed. They resisted modernization, fearing it would diminish their power, effectively stymieing imperial reform. The very tradition of imperial legitimacy became intertwined with their approval, and those who lacked it were swiftly and violently extinguished. The cycle of blood and fear continued for centuries, weakening the empire from within, making it vulnerable to external threats. Their end, ironically, came as brutally as their methods of seizing power. Sultan Mahmud II, a determined reformer, understood that the empire could not survive with the Janissaries as a constant, unpredictable force. In 1826, he meticulously planned their destruction. Using reformed troops and artillery, he unleashed the auspicious incident, utterly annihilating the Janissary corps in Constantinople. Thousands were slaughtered, their barracks burned, their very name erased from the empire's memory. Their reign of terror, a brutal form of military succession, came to an end in a torrent of blood, and so, as the echoes of Janissary drums fade into the silence and the phantom glint of their axes lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne consumed by its own guardians. The Janissary mutiny is a stark reminder that when military power is unbound by authority, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with rebellion and murder. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those slain sultans truly haunt the palace walls? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a military despotism. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 7. The Borgia Dynasty and the Poisoned Chalice. The very pursuit of worldly power and earthly delights truly become a dance with the devil, consuming a family from within, or was their infamous legacy a terrifying, inevitable consequence of unbridled ambition, a profound enigma of a dynasty built on a throne of poison and whispered murder? Our journey now takes us to the glittering, yet utterly ruthless, courts of Renaissance Italy, to the heart of the Papal States in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. Here, the infamous Borgia family, driven by insatiable ambition and a chilling disregard for morality, seized control of the papacy and plunged Rome into an era of unprecedented corruption, political intrigue, and systematic poisoning, leaving behind a haunting legacy of profound evil and a chilling succession of sudden, mysterious deaths. Our story begins with Rodrigo Borgia, a Spanish cardinal of immense cunning and charm, who, through bribery and political maneuvering, ascended to the papacy in 1492, taking the name Pope Alexander VI. His reign was a stark departure from papal tradition. He openly acknowledged his illegitimate children, most famously Cesare Borgia and Lucretia Borgia, and used his immense power to advance their careers, accumulate vast wealth, and establish a dynastic empire within the very heart of the Church. Imagine the atmosphere in the Vatican, the constant whisper of conspiracy, the rustle of silken robes concealing daggers, the sweet scent of exotic poisons, and the palpable fear of their insatiable ambition. The Papal States, ostensibly a spiritual domain, became a battleground for Borgia power, their enemies mysteriously disappearing or dying under suspicious circumstances. Cesare, a brilliant but utterly ruthless general, carved out a personal duchy in central Italy with the full support of his father, the Pope. Lucretia, beautiful and enigmatic, became a pawn in her family's political marriages, her innocence often overshadowed by the dark whispers surrounding her. The chilling atmosphere of the Borgia reign was one of absolute, suffocating terror for their rivals. Their favored method of eliminating obstacles to their power and wealth was poison. Not the crude, obvious poisons of old, but subtle, undetectable concoctions administered in a drink or a meal. Figures of power, wealthy cardinals, rival nobles, seemed to succumb to sudden, violent illnesses or lingering maladies after dining with the Borgias, their deaths often benefiting the family directly through inheritance or confiscation of property. The famous cantarella, a colorless, tasteless poison, became their terrifying signature, whispered in hushed tones across Italy. The unsettling climax of the Borgias' reign was the profound, brutal precedent set by their relentless use of murder. To secure power and wealth, Pope Alexander VI himself died mysteriously in 1503, reportedly after mistakenly drinking a poisoned wine intended for a cardinal he planned to eliminate. His death, a horrifying twist of fate, plunged Cesare into a precarious position, as his power rested entirely on his father's papal authority. Though Cesare attempted to consolidate his gains, he ultimately failed, dying years later in a minor skirmish, far from the grand empire he envisioned. The legacy of the Borgias is one of unparalleled corruption, nepotism, and ruthless violence, forever staining the name of the papacy. Their methods of succession, based on eliminating rivals through any means necessary, transformed the spiritual seat of Christendom into a brutal, earthly battleground, where the poisoned chalice became the ultimate symbol of a terrifying ascent to power. And so, as the echoes of whispered confessions and the chilling clink of poisoned goblets fade into the silence of the Vatican, and the phantom faces of the Borgias linger in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a family, consumed by its own ambition. The Borgia dynasty is a stark reminder that when power is unbound by morality, it devours its own, transforming spiritual leadership into a terrifying dance with murder. In the long-forgotten nights did the ghosts of those poisoned victims truly haunt the ancient palaces. There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ruthlessness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 8. The Great Schism and the Three Papal Thrones. Did the very fabric of Christendom truly tear itself asunder, plunging the spiritual guidance of Europe into a horrifying chaos of rival popes and excommunications? Or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of fractured ambition? A profound enigma of spiritual succession consuming the very faith it purported to lead. Our journey now takes us to the heart of medieval Europe, to the late 14th century, a period of profound spiritual crisis and bewildering division within the Roman Catholic Church. This wasn't merely a theological debate. It was the Great Western Schism, a brutal, rapid-fire succession of rival pontiffs, each claiming to be the true vicar of Christ, each wielding the power of excommunication against the other, plunging Europe into a terrifying cycle of spiritual confusion and political opportunism. Our story begins in 1378 with the death of Pope Gregory XI, who would finally return the papacy to Rome after nearly 70 years in Avignon, France, the Babylonian captivity. The Roman populace, fearing the election of another French pope who might return to Avignon, pressured the cardinals to elect an Italian. They chose Urban VI, but Urban quickly alienated the cardinals with his abrasive manner and attempts at reform. A group of French cardinals, claiming Urban's election was invalid due to duress, secretly met and elected a rival pope, Clement VII, who eventually re-established himself in Avignon. Imagine the atmosphere in Europe, the profound spiritual confusion, the terrifying dilemma of choosing which pope to obey, the constant political maneuvering as kings and princes sided with one claimant or the other, often for their own temporal gain. The unity of Christendom, once a bedrock of medieval life, dissolved into a terrifying schism. The very concept of unquestioned spiritual authority dissolved, replaced by the chilling reality of competing claims, each backed by armies and anathemas. The chilling atmosphere of this schism unfolded with breathtaking speed and spiritual violence. 2 popes, one in Rome and one in Avignon, each declared the other an anti-pope, each excommunicating the other's followers. Europe was literally divided, with France, Scotland, and parts of Spain supporting Avignon, and England, Germany, and Italy largely supporting Rome. This wasn't just a theological argument. It had profound practical consequences. Rival bishops, rival appointments, rival collection of church taxes, and endless propaganda wars, tearing at the moral fabric of society. The unsettling climax of the Great Western Schism was the profound, brutal precedent set by this fractured succession. Attempts to resolve it only deepened the crisis. In 1409, a council of cardinals met in Pisa, attempting to depose both existing popes and elect a new one, Alexander V. This move, intended to unite Christendom, instead resulted in the horrifying spectacle of 3 rival popes simultaneously, claiming the papal throne, one in Rome, one in Avignon, and now one from Pisa. The spiritual authority of the papacy, once almost absolute, was now deeply discredited. Its succession a terrifying game of political maneuvering and spiritual warfare. The schism lasted for nearly 40 years, only truly resolved by the Council of Constance 1414 to 1418, which eventually deposed all 3 claimants and elected a new single pope, Martin V, but the price of this new unity was immense. The schism had weakened the authority of the papacy, emboldened secular rulers, and sowed seeds of dissent that would contribute to the Protestant Reformation a century later. The very notion of a clear, unquestioned spiritual succession had dissolved into an agonizing, self-destructive cycle of competing claims. And so, as the echoes of rival excommunications and the whispers of 1,000 political betrayals fade into the silence, and the phantom glow of 3 papal tiaras seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne torn asunder. The Great Western Schism is a stark reminder that when spiritual authority is unbound by clear succession, it devours its own, transforming sacred leadership into a terrifying dance with division and chaos. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those rival popes truly haunt the ancient cathedrals? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling spiritual violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a divided faith. The fractured unity speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 9. The Mongolian Succession and the Blood of the Khans. Did the vast, conquering Mongol Empire truly devour its own leaders in a relentless, bloody feast of ambition and fratricide? Or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of power? Too immense, a profound enigma of imperial succession consuming the very dynasty that forged it. Our journey now takes us to the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia, to the heart of the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in history. Here, after the death of its legendary founder, Genghis Khan, the process of choosing his successors became a brutal, often horrifying, saga of internal power struggles, assassinations, and civil wars, tearing at the very fabric of an empire built on conquest. Our story begins with Genghis Khan, a military genius who united the disparate Mongol tribes in the early 13th century, creating an unstoppable force that swept across Asia and into Europe. He established a clear line of succession, intending for his empire to be passed down through his descendants, the Golden Family. But his death in 1227 and the sheer vastness of the empire quickly exposed the inherent fragility of this system, particularly when ambitious sons and grandsons, each with their own loyal armies, began to eye the ultimate prize, the title of Great Khan. Imagine the atmosphere in the Mongol encampments, the constant rumble of countless horse hooves, the chilling cries of battle, the sudden shifts in allegiance, the pervasive fear of a Khan's wrath. The vast empire, once unified by Genghis, became a battleground for his own descendants. The traditional succession councils, the Kurultai, meant to ensure a peaceful transfer of power, instead often became tense, protracted affairs, fraught with intrigue and the constant threat of violence. The chilling atmosphere of this succession unfolded with breathtaking speed and brutality. The struggle for the title of Great Khan often led to open warfare among the heirs. Ogedei Khan, Genghis's third son, succeeded him, but his death in 1241 led to a long interregnum. The election of Gayat Khan in 1246, and later Mungay Khan, in 1251, involved ruthless political maneuvering and the elimination of rivals. The most infamous period of succession came after Mungik's death in 1259, plunging the empire into a devastating civil war, the Toluid's civil war between his brothers, Kublai Khan and Arik Bey. This was not just a squabble. It was a bloody, brutal conflict that divided the empire forever. The unsettling climax of Mongolian succession was the profound, brutal precedent set by its relentless cycle of violence and fragmentation. While Kublai eventually triumphed, establishing the Yuan dynasty in China, his victory marked the effective fracturing of the once unified Mongol empire into separate, often warring, khanate. The dream of a single, unified empire under one great Khan dissolved into a terrifying reality of fratricide and regional power struggles. Brothers murdered brothers, cousins fought cousins, all driven by the insatiable thirst for the ultimate imperial title. The Kurultai, once a symbol of unity, became a stage for deadly intrigue. The empire, built on conquest, ultimately struggled to conquer itself. Its vastness, its inherent decentralization, and the boundless ambitions of Genghis's descendants proved to be its undoing. The golden lineage, meant to ensure a smooth transition, instead became a source of endless, bloody conflict, leading to the gradual weakening and eventual dissolution of the unified empire into fractured successor states. And so, as the echoes of galloping hooves and the whispers of 1,000 betrayals fade into the silence of the vast steppes, and the phantom glint of Khan standard seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of an empire, consumed by its own ambition. Mongolian succession, with its ritualized violence and fratricide, is a stark reminder that when power is absolute and boundless, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder. In the long-forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those slain Khans truly haunt the steppes? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle leaving behind only the profound silence of a fragmented empire. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 10. The Ottoman Sultanate of Women and the Harem's shadows. Did the opulent, sequestered world of the imperial harem truly become a terrifying battleground for ultimate power, plunging the Ottoman Empire into a bloody era of female intrigue and regicide? Or was it a chilling, inevitable consequence of a dynasty's vulnerability, a profound enigma of succession ruled from the shadows? Our journey now takes us to the glittering, yet often brutal, courts of the Ottoman Empire, to the secluded, mysterious confines of the imperial harem in the 16th and 17th centuries. Here, for over a century, powerful royal women's mothers, concubines, and grandmothers wielded unprecedented political influence, often dictating imperial succession through ruthless cunning, strategic alliances, and, chillingly, the systematic murder of rival princes, plunging the empire into a period known as the Sultanate of Women. Our story begins in the 1520s with Hurrem Sultan, the favorite concubine and later legal wife of Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the greatest Ottoman sultans. Breaking centuries of tradition, Hurrem used her immense influence over Suleiman to secure her own son's path to the throne, eliminating powerful rivals, including Suleiman's respected eldest son, Mustafa. Her rise marked a profound shift in power dynamics as women from the harem began to play a direct, often ruthless, role in imperial politics and succession. Imagine the atmosphere within the sprawling Topkapi Palace, the constant murmur of whispers behind silken screens, the rustle of luxurious robes concealing desperate ambition, the sweet scent of perfumes mingling with the metallic temps of fear. The harem, ostensibly a place of pleasure and procreation, became a labyrinth of political intrigue, a battleground where female power, once indirect, became direct and often terrifyingly brutal. The chilling atmosphere of the Sultanate of Women unfolded with breathtaking speed and profound violence. These powerful royal women figures, like Hurrem Nurbanu, Sultan Safi Sultan, and Kaiksum Sultan, developed sophisticated networks of spies, eunuchs, and loyal courtiers. Their ambition was not just for themselves, but for their sons, ensuring their ascension to the Sultanate and securing their own status as Queen Mother's valid Sultan. This often involved the systematic elimination of rival princes, brothers, and other potential claimants to the throne. The most infamous and chilling aspect of Ottoman succession during this period was the law of fratricide, formally introduced by Sultan Mehmed II. This decree, aimed at preventing civil wars, allowed a new sultan to execute his brothers and male relatives upon ascending the throne. While meant to stabilize the empire, it led to horrific purges. The mothers and grandmothers in the harem, vying for power, would actively scheme to ensure their sons became sultan, knowing that their failure meant their sons' almost certain death, and often their own demise. The deaths of princes, sometimes strangled in their infancy or youth, became a horrifying, ritualized part of imperial succession, often ordered by their own family. The harem, a gilded cage, also became a brutal internal prison. The unsettling climax of the Sultanate of Women was the profound, brutal precedent set by this era of female dominance over succession. While the empire still expanded and achieved victories, the constant internal strife, the murder of potential leaders, and the pervasive fear of the palace's ruthless intrigues often weakened the central authority of the Sultan himself. The imperial Legitimacy became intertwined with the ruthless cunning of the valid sultan, and those who lacked her support were swiftly and violently extinguished. The cycle of blood and fear continued for over a century, a haunting testament to power wielded from the shadows. And so, as the echoes of whispered plots and the chilling sighs of dying princes fade into the silence of the harem and the phantom glint of 1,000 jewels seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne ruled from the shadows. The Sultanate of Women is a stark reminder that when power is pursued with unbridled ambition, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder and intrigue, even within the most secluded confines. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those murdered princes and their scheming mothers truly haunt the gilded chambers? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a brutal, hidden despotism. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ruthlessness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 11. The Byzantine usurpations and the cycle of regicide. Did the grand, glittering Byzantine Empire, heir to Rome's vast legacy, truly devour its own leaders in a relentless, brutal cycle of usurpation and regicide? Or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of an unbound ambition, a profound enigma of a throne perpetually stained with blood? Our journey now takes us again to the opulent, yet often terrifying, courts of the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, where the pursuit of imperial power was frequently a horrifying saga of political intrigue, betrayal, and the ruthless extinguishing of rivals. It was a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying game of survival, perpetually played out with chilling violence and often literal blinding. Our story spans centuries, from the 5th to the 11th, a long period of both flourishing culture and profound internal strife within the Byzantine Empire. The throne, though theoretically passed through dynastic lines, was often a prize seized by powerful generals, ambitious courtiers, cunning empresses, or ruthless palace eunuchs. The traditions of imperial succession were constantly challenged by usurpation, and the methods used to neutralize rivals were often as cruel as they were effective. Among these, assassination, poisoning, and particularly blinding were the favored tools of ascent and elimination. Imagine the atmosphere in the great palace of Constantinople, the constant murmur of conspiracy echoing through gilded halls, the rustle of silken robes concealing daggers, the sweet scent of exotic perfumes mingling with the metallic temps of fear. The city, a symbol of stability and Christian faith, often became a hunting ground for rival factions, a stage for deadly dramas. Into this cauldron of simmering ambitions stepped a succession of pretenders, each believing themselves destined for the purple and each willing to shed blood to seize it. The chilling atmosphere of Byzantine usurpations unfolded with breathtaking speed and profound brutality. Unlike the more stable Roman Empire of the West, the Byzantine throne was remarkably fluid, often changing hands through violent coups. Emperors like Maurice deposed and murdered with his sons in 602 CE, Heraclius, whose son Heraclius was mutilated and exiled in 641 CE, Justinian II, who suffered mutilation, exile, and later executed those who had deposed him, and Michael III, assassinated in 867 CE by Basil I, who founded a new dynasty, illustrate this grim pattern. Each new ruler often had to literally eliminate all potential rivals, especially male relatives, who could claim a competing right to the throne. The unsettling climax of Byzantine succession was the profound, brutal precedent set by such relentless use. It fostered a culture where rivals were not simply removed, but permanently incapacitated or utterly destroyed. The practice of political blinding, where a hot iron or swift blade would be used to put out the eyes of a deposed emperor, a defeated general, or a royal prince, ensured they could no longer lead armies, command respect, or even navigate the labyrinthian palace. This horrifying, yet merciful alternative to death ensured the continuity of the ruling emperor, while leaving the vanquished in a living hell, a sightless shadow of their former power. The very tradition of imperial legitimacy became intertwined with the ability to ruthlessly eliminate rivals, leaving a trail of blood and blind figures in the wake of ascending power. This constant cycle of regicide and usurpation, while sometimes bringing competent new leaders to power, also profoundly destabilized the empire, consuming immense resources and intellectual energy in internal struggles rather than external defense. It cultivated a pervasive paranoia within the court, where no one, not even family, could be fully trusted, and the threat of a violent overthrow was ever present. And so, as the echoes of screams and the chilling hiss of hot irons fade into the silence of the Byzantine palace, and the phantom faces of the blinded linger in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne perpetually stained by usurpation and mutilation. Byzantine successions, with their chilling brutality, are a stark reminder that the pursuit of absolute power can twist justice into grotesque forms, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with violence and disfigurement. In the long, forgotten nights did the ghosts of those slain and sightless emperors truly haunt the imperial chambers, their reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of eternal dread. The lost eyes and spilled blood speak volumes, a testament to imperial ruthlessness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 12. The Child King. Tutankhamun and the Unseen Hand. Did a young pharaoh, barely a man, truly succumb to the ravages of disease? His reign abruptly cut short, or does his swift, mysterious death conceal a deeper, more chilling secret? A whisper of unseen hands and a brutal imperial succession orchestrated from the shadows of ancient Egypt. Our journey now takes us to the shimmering, sun-drenched sands of ancient Egypt, to the height of the New Kingdom, a period of immense power and gilded splendor. Here, a young king, Tutankhamun, ascended to the throne at a tender age, reigned for less than a decade, and died under circumstances that have baffled and tantalized historians for over a century, leaving behind a haunting enigma of a sudden royal disappearance. Our story begins around 1332 BCE, when a boy of only 9 years old, Tutankhamun, became pharaoh, inheriting a kingdom still reeling from the religious revolution of his probable father. Tutankhamun, guided by powerful advisors like the Grand Vizier, I, and General Horemheb, quickly moved to restore the traditional polytheistic religion of Egypt, abandoning Akhenaten's controversial monotheism. His reign, though short, was marked by the rebuilding of temples, the re-establishment of ancient rites, and the restoration of stability. Imagine the atmosphere in Thebes, the solemn processions to restored temples, the fervent prayers to the ancient gods, the young pharaoh, a living god, presiding over ceremonies. Yet, beneath this veneer of restoration, the currents of power flowed deep and dangerously. Tutankhamun was young, perhaps frail, and surrounded by ambitious men who had wielded immense power during his minority. The succession, should he die childless, was uncertain. The chilling atmosphere of his death permeated the court. Around 1323 BCE, after only 9 years on the throne, Tutankhamun died. He was buried with unprecedented haste and astounding wealth, in a tomb that would remain undiscovered for over 3 millennia. But the circumstances of his death were, from the beginning, shrouded in mystery. He was young, seemingly healthy, and no obvious cause of death was recorded in the Egyptian annals. The unsettling climax of Tutankhamun's tale lies in the persistent, tormenting ambiguity surrounding his demise. What truly caused the death of the boy king? For decades, speculation has run wild. Was it a fall, perhaps from a chariot, as indicated by a severe leg fracture discovered in his mummy? Or was it a murder, a brutal assassination orchestrated by one of his powerful advisors, eager to seize the throne for himself, or to ensure a particular succession? The prominent roles of Ai, who quickly succeeded him as pharaoh, and Horemheb, who became pharaoh after Ai, have always cast a shadow of suspicion. Early X-rays of his mummy revealed a possible blow to the back of the head, fueling murder theories. However, later, more advanced CT scans and DNA analysis have offered complex and conflicting evidence. A severe compound fracture to his left leg, suggesting a fall or accident, evidence of malaria, and a bone necrosis. While these findings suggest possible natural causes exacerbated by injury, they do not definitively rule out foul play or neglect. The trauma to his head was later determined to be likely post-mortem, possibly inflicted during the mummification process. Yet the possibility of a sudden, debilitating accident that left him vulnerable to illness, or perhaps even an opportunistic final blow, still lingers. The precise sequence of events remains elusive, leaving his swift departure a profound enigma. The ghost of Tutankhamun, resurrected by the discovery of his tomb, whispers of a profound human drama within the gilded confines of ancient power. His early, mysterious death highlights the fragility of imperial succession, even in a civilization obsessed with eternal life, and the ruthless cunning that often lurked behind the sacred rituals of the pharaohs. And so, as the echoes of his vanished breath fade into the silence of his opulent tomb, and the image of his golden mask lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a boy king's abrupt end. Tutankhamun's death is a stark reminder that even the most sacred of successions can be tainted by ambition and the chilling shadow of an unseen hand. In the long-forgotten nights, did the whispers of court intrigue truly seal his fate, his short reign forever an unsolved enigma of power and chilling violence? A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of royal succession could become a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a mysterious, royal disappearance. The glittering gold speaks volumes, a testament to unsolved power struggles, and a chilling enigma of ancient royalty. Chapter 13. The Murder of Commodus and the Era of Gladiators did the very core of the Roman Empire truly devour its tyrannical ruler, his life extinguished in a horrifying act of desperate conspiracy? Or was his brutal assassination an inevitable consequence of madness, a profound enigma of a throne demanding the ultimate sacrifice for its survival? Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet increasingly debauched and terrifying courts of the Roman Empire, to the late 2nd century CE. Here, the reign of Emperor Commodus, a figure of boundless ego and terrifying cruelty, plunged Rome into an era of instability and fear, culminating in his brutal murder, which opened the gates to a century of chaos and bloody succession. Our story begins in 180 CE, when Commodus, the son of the revered philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius, ascended to the throne. Unlike his wise and stoic father, Commodus was vain, self-indulgent, and increasingly tyrannical. He abandoned his father's policies, squandered the imperial treasury, and alienated the Senate. His obsession with gladiatorial combat, even participating in the arena himself, was seen as a profound disgrace to the imperial dignity, further fueling resentment and fear. Imagine the atmosphere in Rome, the whispers of discontent in the Senate, the terrified silence in the imperial palace, the pervasive sense of a ruler descending into madness. The emperor, once a symbol of stability and order, had become a source of erratic cruelty and profound embarrassment. Conspiracies, a viper in the heart of power, began to coil among his closest advisors and even his own family. The chilling atmosphere of Commodus's reign unfolded with increasing terror. He grew ever more paranoid, ordering executions of prominent senators and courtiers on the flimsiest pretexts. His behavior became erratic, his demands outlandish. He identified himself with Hercules, dressed as a gladiator, and even declared Rome would be renamed Colonia Comediana. The empire seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable violent end. The unsettling climax of Commodus's reign came on December 31st, 192 CE. A conspiracy involving his mistress Marcia, his chamberlain Eclectus, and the Praetorian prefect Lattes hatched a plot to assassinate him. Their fear was palpable. Commodus had already planned to execute them. They first attempted to poison him, but when that failed, he was strangled in his bath by Narcissus, a wrestler hired for the purpose. The death was brutal, intimate, and desperate, a final, horrifying act to remove a tyrant who had become unbearable. His assassination was intended to bring relief and stability, to restore the dignity of the imperial office. Instead, it merely opened the floodgates to a century of unparalleled chaos and brutal succession. The year of the 5 emperors immediately followed, plunging Rome into another devastating civil war as rival claimants vied for the throne. The murder of Commodus, rather than solving Rome's problems, exacerbated them, setting a chilling precedent that imperial power was now to be violently seized and defended, leading to a long period of military anarchy known as the Crisis of the 3rd century. The era of the Pax Romana was truly over. Commodus's brutal end, born from desperation and tyranny, ushered in an age where the imperial succession was decided not by lineage or law, but by the sword, a horrifying, never-ending dance of power and blood. And so, as the echoes of his last desperate breath fade into the silence of his imperial bath, and the phantom glint of 1,000 daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne stained by tyranny and violent removal. The assassination of Commodus is a stark reminder that when absolute power descends into madness, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with death. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those he murdered truly haunt his final moments? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of an empire in freefall. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 14. The Seizure of Power by Septimius, Severus and the rise of the military emperors did the very fabric of the Roman Empire truly unravel into a desperate struggle for survival, where military might was the only path to the purple? Or was the ruthless ascent of Septimius Severus a terrifying, inevitable consequence of an empire consumed by its own armies, a profound enigma of a throne perpetually claimed by the sword? Our journey now takes us to the tumultuous end of the 2nd century CE, a period of profound instability following the murder of Emperor Commodus. Here, in the ensuing chaos, a formidable general, Lucius Septimius Severus, seized power through sheer military force, establishing a new precedent for imperial succession and ushering in an era of overt military rule that would define the Roman Empire for decades. Our story begins in 193 CE, the infamous year of the 5 emperors, a time when the Roman throne became a prize to be auctioned off to the highest bidder by the Praetorian Guard. After Commodus's murder, the Guard initially sold the emperorship to Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator, a move that enraged the legions stationed throughout the provinces. 3 powerful generals, each commanding vast armies, immediately declared themselves emperor, plunging Rome into a brutal civil war. Among them was Septimius Severus, commander of the Pannonian legions. Imagine the atmosphere across the vast Roman Empire, the constant rumble of distant legions on the march, the sudden, terrifying shift of loyalties, the pervasive fear of civil war engulfing every province. The stability that Rome had known under the Antonine emperors dissolved into a terrifying free-for-all, a ruthless competition for the ultimate prize. The imperial throne, once a symbol of divine right or senatorial approval, became a bloody target, beckoning ambitious men only to consume them. The chilling atmosphere of Severus's ascent unfolded with breathtaking speed and brutal efficiency. He was not a Roman aristocrat by birth, but a Punic-speaking North African, a man of humble origins who had risen through the military ranks. His legions adored him. He quickly marched on Rome, easily overthrowing Didius Julianus. But his true challenge came from his rivals, Pescennius Niger in the east and Clodius Albinus in the west. Severus dealt with them with ruthless determination. He defeated and killed Niger in 194 CE, then turned his attention to Albinus, crushing his forces. In the devastating Battle of Lugdunum, modern Lyon, in 197 CE, one of the largest and bloodiest battles in Roman history, the unsettling climax of Severus's reign was the profound, brutal precedent he set for imperial succession. He ruled openly and unambiguously through military power, telling his sons, on his deathbed, "Be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all other men." He showered his legions with pay and privileges, making it clear that their loyalty, not the Senate's approval or traditional lineage, was the key to power. He purified the Praetorian Guard, replacing them with his own loyal legionaries, ensuring his grip on the capital. His methods were starkly pragmatic, brutal, and effective. His reign, though outwardly stable, irrevocably shifted the balance of power in Rome, ushering in the era of the military emperors of the 3rd century. Succession would now increasingly be decided on the battlefield, by the acclamation of legions, rather than by careful succession planning or senatorial decree. This period of constant military coups and civil wars would profoundly destabilize the empire, leading to the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of near collapse characterized by endless warfare, economic turmoil, and the rapid succession of soldier emperors, most of whom met violent ends. And so, as the echoes of marching legions and the whispers of 1,000 military coups fade into the silence, and the phantom glint of a Roman sword seems to shimmer in the darkness. We are left with the haunting legacy of a throne claimed by force. The ascent of Septimius Severus is a stark reminder that when an empire relies solely on military might, it ultimately devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with the sword. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those he defeated truly haunt his imperial ambitions? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of relentless power and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of an empire consumed by its own armies. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ruthless power and a chilling enigma of military might. Chapter 15. The Murder of Agrippina and the Mother's Curse did the very core of the Roman Empire truly turn upon its own empress, her life extinguished in a horrifying act of matricide? Or was her brutal murder an inevitable consequence of unbounded ambition, a profound enigma of a mother's relentless grip and a son's terrifying descent into tyranny? Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet increasingly debauched and terrifying courts of the Roman Empire, to the mid-1st century CE. Here, the formidable Agrippina, the younger, an ambitious and ruthless empress, plotted tirelessly to secure the succession of her son, Nero, to the imperial throne, only to eventually fall victim to his terrifying paranoia and murderous wrath. A chilling testament to the dangers of imperial power. Our story begins in 49 CE, when Agrippina, niece and fourth wife of Emperor Claudius, skillfully manipulated events to ensure her young son, Nero, was adopted by Claudius and designated as his successor, sidelining Claudius's own biological son, Britannicus. Agrippina was a woman of formidable intelligence, ambition, and a chilling willingness to use any means necessary to achieve her goals. She wielded immense power behind the scenes, effectively ruling through Claudius, and later, through her young son. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial palace, the whispers of intrigue, the rustle of silken robes concealing dark plots, the sweet scent of exotic perfumes masking the pervasive fear of Agrippina's influence. Nero, though initially pliable, grew increasingly resentful of his mother's overbearing control, her constant presence and attempts to dominate his every decision. The bond between mother and son, once a pathway to power, became a suffocating chain. The chilling atmosphere of their relationship unfolded with increasing tension. Agrippina eliminated rivals, including potentially poisoning Claudius to hasten Nero's ascent. She ruthlessly purged anyone who stood in her way, solidifying Nero's, and thus her own power. But as Nero matured, his resentment festered. He began to chafe under her constant supervision and her public displays of authority, which undermined his own image as emperor. His paranoia, fueled by advisors who saw Agrippina as a threat to their own influence, began to consume him. The unsettling climax of Agrippina's life came in 59 CE. Nero, determined to free himself from his mother's suffocating grip, decided to murder her. His first attempt was an elaborate ruse. He designed a collapsible boat, intending for her to drown during a staged shipwreck. However, Agrippina, a strong swimmer, survived and made it to shore. Nero, now consumed by terror and rage, abandoned all pretense. He dispatched assassins to her villa. She met her death with defiant courage, reportedly telling her assassins to strike her womb, the source of the son who was now destroying her. Her brutal assassination, A horrific act of matricide was intended to secure Nero's absolute power and remove a perceived threat. Instead, it merely plunged him deeper into a spiral of paranoia, delusion, and unprecedented tyranny. The murder of his own mother was a psychological breaking point, freeing him from moral constraints and ushering in the most debauched and cruel phases of his reign, ultimately leading to his own downfall and suicide. The unnatural crime sent shivers through Rome, a chilling omen of an emperor who had crossed an unforgivable line. Agrippina's ruthless ambition had secured her son's succession, but in doing so, she had created a monster who would ultimately turn on her. Her death, a horrifying twist of fate, highlights the dark, consuming nature of imperial power, especially when wielded by those consumed by ambition, and the profound tragedy that can unfold within the most intimate bonds when a throne is at stake. And so, as the echoes of Agrippina's defiance fade into the silence of the Roman villa, and the phantom glint of assassins' daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a mother's curse. The murder of Agrippina is a stark reminder that the pursuit of absolute power can consume even the most sacred of bonds, transforming succession into a terrifying dance with matricide. In the long-forgotten nights did the ghost of Agrippina truly haunt her murderous son, her ambitions forever an unsolved enigma of ruthless power and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to unnatural cruelty and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 16. The assassination of Caligula and the Praetorians bladed the very heart of the Roman Empire, truly devour its mad ruler. His life, extinguished in a horrifying act of desperate conspiracy, or was his brutal assassination an inevitable consequence of unbound tyranny? A profound enigma of an imperial throne demanding the ultimate sacrifice for its survival. Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet increasingly insane and terrifying courts of the Roman Empire to the mid-1st century CE. Here, the reign of Emperor Caligula, a figure of boundless ego, terrifying cruelty, and profound mental instability, plunged Rome into an era of capricious terror, culminating in his brutal murder at the hands of his own guards, a chilling testament to the dangers of imperial madness. Our story begins in 37 CE, when Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, famously known as Caligula, Little Boot, ascended to the throne. Initially hailed with hope and enthusiasm after the long, grim reign of Tiberius, Caligula quickly descended into a terrifying spiral of madness, paranoia, and grotesque cruelty. He squandered the imperial treasury, engaged in shocking debauchery, and treated the Senate with contempt, claiming divinity and demanding worship. His increasingly erratic and sadistic behavior alienated everyone, from senators to his own household. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial palace, the whispers of fear, the terrified silence in the presence of the emperor, the sudden, inexplicable executions, the pervasive sense of living under the whim of a madman. The emperor, once a symbol of stability and order, had become a source of unpredictable terror and profound humiliation. Conspiracies, a serpent in the heart of power, began to coil among those closest to him, particularly within the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite personal bodyguards, who were increasingly disgusted by his erratic behavior and the threats he posed to their own lives and status. The chilling atmosphere of Caligula's reign unfolded with increasing horror. He demanded that a statue of himself be erected in the Temple of Jerusalem, threatened to make his horse a consul, and often mocked and humiliated those around him. His cruelty was legendary, finding perverse pleasure in suffering. The terror he inspired was palpable. No one knew who would be his next victim. His paranoia, fueled by real threats, made his decisions ever more arbitrary and deadly. The unsettling climax of Caligula's life came on January 24, 41 CE. A conspiracy, led by Cassius Chaerea, a tribune of the Praetorian Guard whom Caligula frequently mocked for his effeminate voice, and other disgruntled officers and senators, finally launched their attack. As Caligula left a theatrical performance, passing through a dark, narrow corridor beneath the palace, the conspirators ambushed him. They stabbed him repeatedly, viciously, in the neck, chest, and groin, silencing his screams and ending his reign of terror. He was just 28 years old. His brutal assassination, a horrific act of regicide by his own guards, was intended to bring immediate relief and restore order to the empire. Instead, it plunged Rome into a brief, terrifying interregnum of chaos, where the Praetorian Guard debated putting Rome under martial law or restoring the Republic. Ultimately, they discovered and elevated Claudius Caligula's uncle to the throne, ushering in a new era. The murder of Caligula, rather than solving Rome's problems, highlighted the profound vulnerability of the imperial office to military power and internal plots. It set a chilling precedent that even the emperor could be removed by force, often by those closest to him. In the absence of clear succession rules, Caligula's brutal end, born from desperation and tyranny, underscored the terrifying reality that imperial power, when wielded by a madman, could only be extinguished by violence, ushering in an age where imperial succession was constantly at risk from the Praetorian's blade. And so, as the echoes of his last desperate screams fade into the silence of the Roman palace, and the phantom glint of 100 daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne stained by madness and violent removal. The assassination of Caligula is a stark reminder that when absolute power descends into unbound tyranny, it devours its own transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with madness and murder. In the long forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those he tormented truly haunt his final moments? His short reign forever, an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a tyrant's abrupt end. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 17. The Reign of the Child Emperor and the Court's Cruelty did. The very essence of imperial power truly corrupt the souls of its guardians, leading to the brutal manipulation and ultimate demise of innocent child emperors. Or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of vulnerable succession, a profound enigma of a throne demanding the ultimate sacrifice from its youngest claimants? Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet often terrifying, courts of ancient empires, from Rome to Byzantium, from China to the Ottoman lands, where the ascent of a child emperor often became a chilling saga of ruthless regents, scheming eunuchs, and the systematic elimination of perceived threats, culminating in the untimely, often violent, death of the boy on the throne. Our story begins with the concept of a dynastic succession where a king or emperor dies, leaving behind only an underage heir. This was a situation fraught with peril. A child ruler, ostensibly the supreme authority, was in reality a puppet, controlled by powerful regents, ambitious relatives, or military commanders. The imperial court, a labyrinth of intrigue, became a deadly playground where factions vied for control over the young sovereign, and thus over the empire itself. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial palace, the hushed whispers of competing factions, the rustle of silken robes concealing dark plots, the terrifying realization for the young emperor that his life hung by a thread, dependent on the ever-shifting loyalties of those around him. The throne, meant to be his divine right, became a gilded cage, a trap from which there was often no escape. The chilling atmosphere surrounding the reigns of child emperors unfolded with pervasive terror. History is replete with examples. Gordian III of Rome, who ascended at age 13, surrounded by powerful Praetorian prefects, and died mysteriously, likely murdered by his successor, Philip the Arab. In Byzantium, Theodosius II ruled as a child, manipulated by his older sister, Pulchar, and powerful eunuchs. Later, John I Eximesques ruled as Kemperor alongside child emperors Basil II and Constantine VIII, who were kept in gilded isolation, their lives precarious. In China, countless child emperors were placed on the throne only to be poisoned, deposed, or simply left powerless, their fates dictated by powerful empress dowagers or ambitious ministers. The Ottoman Empire, too, saw child sultans like Mehmed IV, whose mother, Turhan Hatice Sultan, effectively ruled for years, ruthlessly eliminating rivals in the harem. The unsettling climax of the child emperor's reign was the profound, brutal reality of their vulnerability and eventual disappearance from power, often through violent means. They were rarely allowed to grow into their own authority. Their education was often neglected, their lives isolated, and their every move scrutinized. Their advisors, ostensibly their protectors, often became their jailers, then their executioners. When the child emperor began to show signs of independent thought, or when their protectors became too powerful, or when a new faction arose with an older, more pliable candidate, the child's life was immediately at risk. Poaching, strangulation, or mysterious illnesses were common fates. The very concept of smooth, dynastic succession dissolved into an agonizing, self-destructive cycle of infanticide or regicide, all to secure power. The innocent lives of these young rulers became sacrifices on the altar of imperial ambition. Their reigns a chilling testament to the ruthless cruelty of court politics. And so, as the echoes of childish whispers in vast empty halls fade into the silence, and the phantom glint of a hidden dagger lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne demanding the ultimate sacrifice from its youngest claimants. The reign of the child emperor is a stark reminder that when power is unbound by morality, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with innocence and murder. In the long-forgotten nights did the ghosts of those slain. Child rulers truly haunt the imperial nurseries, their short reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to innocence lost and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 18. The Bloody Purges of Qin. Shi Huang and the Great Unification did the very notion of imperial unity truly demand a terrifying ocean of blood, purging all dissent, or was the ruthless consolidation of power by China's first emperor a Qilin, inevitable consequence of unbound ambition, a profound enigma of a throne built on unimaginable cruelty and the systematic obliteration of opposition. Our journey now takes us to the vast ancient lands of China, to the tumultuous final decades of the Warring States period and the dawn of the Imperial era. In the 3rd century BCE, here a formidable, ruthless, and utterly driven king, Qin Shi Huang, conquered all rivals, unified China under a single iron fist, and established the Qin dynasty, leaving behind a haunting legacy of unprecedented brutality and a chilling blueprint for imperial succession built on relentless purges. Our story begins with Zheng, king of Qin, a state known for its military might and legalist philosophy, which advocated for strict laws and centralized power. For centuries, China had been fragmented into warring states, locked in a brutal, endless struggle for supremacy. Zheng, with cunning strategy and overwhelming force, systematically conquered each rival state, culminating in the unification of all China in 221 BCE. He declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, initiating a new era of centralized rule. Imagine the atmosphere in China: the constant rumble of Qin armies on the march, the terrifying screams of conquered populations, the pervasive fear of their ruthless efficiency. The vast land, once a patchwork of warring kingdoms, became a single, unified, yet terrifyingly controlled empire. Qin Shi Huang, obsessed with absolute power and eternal rule, embarked on a series of monumental, brutal projects. He built the Great Wall, standardized weights, measures, and currency, and connected vast road networks. But his methods of consolidating power were rooted in unspeakable cruelty. The chilling atmosphere of Qin Shi Huang's reign unfolded with pervasive terror. He brutally suppressed all dissent, viewing any challenge to his authority as a threat to the very unity of China. His most infamous acts of ruthless purges included the burning of books and burying of scholars. Around 213 to 212 BCE, he ordered the destruction of all non-Qin historical records and philosophical texts, especially Confucian ones, believing they fostered independent thought and challenged his authority. Scholars who resisted or advocated for older traditions were rounded up, sometimes hundreds at a time, and buried alive. This was not merely censorship. It was an attempt to erase the past, to control thought itself, ensuring his version of history and his absolute power. His obsession with immortality and control extended to his own succession. He constantly searched for elixirs of life, fearing death and the inevitable transfer of power. He exiled his own son, Fusu, who dared to advise against the harsh policies. Upon his death in 210 BCE, his chief eunuch and prime minister conspired to forge imperial decrees, forcing Fusu to commit suicide and installing a weaker, younger son, Qin Shi, on the throne, a testament to the brutality and intrigue even. After the emperor's death, the unsettling climax of Qin Shi Huang's legacy was the profound, brutal precedent he set for imperial succession: absolute control, maintained through terrifying purges and the systematic obliteration of opposition. He forged an empire, but he did so by sacrificing countless lives, destroying intellectual heritage, and instilling a pervasive fear that would echo through subsequent dynasties. His methods, though ensuring a brief, unified reign, ultimately sowed the seeds of rebellion, and the Qin dynasty collapsed swiftly after his death, consumed by the very forces of discontent it had so brutally suppressed. And so, as the echoes of burning scrolls and the whispers of buried scholars fade into the silence of ancient China, and the phantom glint of 1,000 swords lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne built on blood and terror. Qin Shi Huang's brutal purges are a stark reminder that the pursuit of absolute power can devour all, transforming unity into a terrifying dance with obliteration. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those he silenced truly haunt his vast mausoleum? There lives forever an unsolved enigma of tyranny and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a unified empire forged in utter cruelty. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ruthless power and a chilling enigma of control. Chapter 19. The Byzantine eunuchs and the power behind the throne. Did the very seat of imperial power truly become a puppet show, its strings pulled by silent, shadowy figures from within the gilded confines of the palace? Or was the terrifying ascent of the Byzantine eunuchs an inevitable consequence of vulnerability, a profound enigma of succession ruled from the deepest, most dangerous recesses of the imperial court? Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet often brutal, courts of the Byzantine Empire, to the secluded, mysterious confines of the imperial palace from the 5th century CE onwards. Here, 4 centuries, a unique class of courtiers, the unprecedented political influence, often dictating imperial succession through ruthless cunning, strategic alliances, and the chilling manipulation of emperors, becoming the true power behind the throne. Our story begins with the long-standing tradition in many ancient empires, including Rome and Byzantium, of castrating male slaves or captives to serve in imperial households, particularly in the private chambers of the emperor or the empress. Their lack of family ties, their presumed loyalty as they could not found dynasties of their own, and their access to the innermost workings of the palace made them indispensable. Over time, in Byzantium, these eunuchs rose to positions of immense power, becoming chamberlains, chief ministers, generals, and even patriarchs. Bypassing traditional aristocratic structures, imagine the atmosphere within the sprawling great Palace of Constantinople. The constant murmur of whispers behind heavy curtains, the rustle of silken robes, the sweet scent of perfumes mingling with the pervasive fear of their subtle, yet absolute, power. The emperor's private chambers, ostensibly a place of security, became a labyrinth of political intrigue, a battleground where eunuchs, unseen and often underestimated, orchestrated the rise and fall of emperors, pulling the strings of succession. From the shadows, the chilling atmosphere of the eunuch's influence unfolded with pervasive terror. Figures like Eutropius in the late 4th century, or later, Basileikopinos in the 10th century, wielded power greater than many emperors. They controlled access to the emperor, managed the imperial treasury, oversaw the bureaucracy, and critically, often controlled the education and upbringing of young princes destined for the throne. They were masters of intrigue, adept at poisoning the minds of emperors against rivals, or subtly nudging the path of succession in their favored direction. They were involved in numerous coups, assassinations, and depositions, ensuring their own continued influence. They could elevate ambitious generals or bring down arrogant nobles, all from their positions of intimate access. The unsettling climax of the Byzantine eunuchs' influence was the profound, brutal precedent set by their relentless interference. In succession, they fostered a culture where loyalty was fluid, where rivals were constantly being undermined, and where the emperor's life often depended on his ability to outmaneuver the shadowy figures who ostensibly served him. They ensured that imperial legitimacy was often a negotiation, and sometimes a brutal reality, with those who controlled the palace itself. They contributed to periods of immense instability as emperors struggled to escape their suffocating grip or to appease their insatiable desire for power. Their influence even led to periods where the empire was effectively ruled by a succession of puppet emperors, with the eunuchs holding the true reins of power. Their power, however, was as precarious as it was immense. When a strong emperor emerged, or when their machinations became too obvious, they too could fall, often violently. But their mark on Byzantine succession, the chilling reality of power wielded by the third sex from the deepest shadows of the imperial court, was undeniable and enduring. And so, as the echoes of whispered plots and the chilling sighs of dying emperors fade into the silence of the Byzantine palace, and the phantom glint of 1,000 jewels seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne, ruled from the shadows. The Byzantine eunuch's ascent is a stark reminder that when power is pursued with unbridled ambition, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with intrigue and murder, even within the most secluded confines. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those they elevated and those they destroyed truly haunt the gilded chambers? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a ruthless, hidden despotism. Their unseen influence speaks volumes, a testament to ruthlessness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 20. The Murder of Agrippa. Posthumous and the unseen hand of Livia dead, the very notion of imperial legitimacy truly demand the extinguishing of innocent blood, or was the swift murder of a young prince a terrifying, inevitable consequence of an unbound ambition? A profound enigma of an empress's ruthless cunning and a succession secured by murder. Our journey now takes us to the glittering, yet utterly ruthless, courts of the early Roman Empire, to the dawn of the Pax Romana. Here, a young, innocent prince, Agrippa, posthumous, grandson of the revered Emperor Augustus, disappeared from the succession under circumstances so mysterious and swift that they have forever cast a chilling shadow of suspicion over the most powerful woman in Rome, Empress Livia. Our story begins with the aging Emperor Augustus, Rome's first emperor, meticulously planning his succession. He had no biological sons, so he had painstakingly groomed various male heirs, adopting them and elevating them to positions of power. Among his grandsons was Agrippa Postumus, a young man of robust physique but reportedly rough manners, who was the last surviving direct male descendant through his daughter, Julia. He was a potential threat to the carefully constructed succession plan that eventually favored Tiberius, Augustus's stepson and Livia's son. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial palace, the hushed whispers of ambition, the rustle of silken robes concealing dark plots, the pervasive fear of a succession crisis after Augustus's long, stable reign. Livia, Augustus's powerful and cunning wife, was a formidable figure, determined to secure the succession for her own son, Tiberius. She was widely suspected of poisoning anyone who stood in Tiberius's path, a terrifying shadow of ruthless ambition that haunted the imperial household. The chilling atmosphere surrounding Agrippa, Postumus, unfolded with pervasive dread. Despite being Augustus's biological grandson, he was exiled to a remote island, reportedly for unruly behavior and insolence. This removal conveniently cleared the path for Tiberius, The final, unsettling climax came just hours after Augustus' death in 14 CE. Agrippa Postumus was swiftly and brutally murdered by his guards on his place of exile. The order for his execution was never explicitly traced back to Tiberius, who publicly denied giving it, or to Livia, who remained silent. The unsettling climax of Agrippa Postumus's tale lies in the persistent, tormenting ambiguity of his swift demise. Who gave the order? Was it Tiberius, eliminating a potential rival with ruthless efficiency, perhaps immediately upon learning of Augustus's death? Or was it Livia, acting preemptively and without Tiberius's direct instruction, determined to remove the last obstacle to her son's undisputed ascent, her unseen hand orchestrating the murder from the shadows? The fact that the assassination happened so immediately after Augustus's death, and without clear command, strongly implicates a powerful figure acting decisively in the very moment of transition. His murder, a horrifying act of regicide against a young, relatively innocent prince, was intended to solidify Tiberius's claim and prevent any potential challenges to the imperial succession. Instead, it merely highlighted the dark, ruthless nature of imperial power and the pervasive paranoia that permeated the ruling family. The ghost of Agrippa Postumus became a chilling reminder of the dangers inherent in being too close or too inconveniently related to the imperial throne. And so, as the echoes of Agrippa Postumus's last breath fade into the silence of his remote island prison, and the phantom glint of a hidden blade lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a prince extinguished for convenience. His brutal murder is a stark reminder that the pursuit of absolute power can consume even the innocent, transforming succession into a terrifying dance with unrecorded assassination. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghost of Agrippa truly haunt the imperial palace, his short life forever an unsolved enigma of power and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to unseen ruthlessness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 21. The Ottoman Succession Law of Fratricide and the Cage of Princes Dead. The very desire for imperial stability truly demand the unspeakable act of royal fratricide, plunging the Ottoman dynasty into a horrifying cycle of brother against brother, or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of unbound ambition? A profound enigma of a throne perpetually demanding the blood of its own kin. Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet often brutal, courts of the Ottoman Empire, a vast dominion built on conquest and dynastic power. Here, for centuries, the process of imperial succession was codified by a chilling decree, the law of fratricide, which allowed a new sultan to execute his brothers and male relatives to secure his reign, leading to a horrifying saga of royal murder and a profound, chilling silence in the gilded cages of the palace. Our story begins with Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror, who, after taking Constantinople in 1453, sought to bring order to the often Ottoman succession. Before his time, rival princes would frequently wage devastating civil wars for the throne, tearing the empire apart. To prevent such internal strife, Mehmed formalized a chilling tradition into law, the law of fratricide. His decree stated, "Of any of my sons that ascends the throne, it is permissible for him to kill his brothers in the interest of the world order." The majority of the ulama have sanctioned this. This was not a mere suggestion. It was an imperial mandate, a brutal solution to a perpetual problem. Imagine the atmosphere in the Ottoman palace, particularly upon the death of a sultan, the hushed, terrified whispers, the frantic jockeying for position, the pervasive fear for the lives of every prince. The heir apparent, often the eldest son, had to literally race to the capital and secure the throne before any of his brothers could raise an army. His very first act, after seizing power, would be to dispatch silent executioners. The chilling atmosphere of this succession unfolded with profound terror and grim inevitability. Upon a new sultan's accession, his brothers, even infants, would be systematically strangled by deaf-mute executioners using silk cords, a method chosen to avoid royal blood being spilled on the sacred ground. The bodies would then be secretly interred, their brief lives extinguished for the sake of the empire's stability. Figures like Sultan Selim I, in his ruthless pursuit of power, executed not only his brothers but also his own sons and nephews, ensuring a clear path to the throne and consolidating his brutal authority. The unsettling climax of the law of fratricide was the profound, brutal precedent it set for imperial succession, the systematic murder of close family members as a pragmatic necessity for maintaining the empire's unity. This policy, while undeniably cruel and morally repugnant, did indeed contribute to periods of greater stability, preventing the devastating civil wars that plagued other dynasties. However, it also created a pervasive climate of fear within the imperial family, turning brothers into deadly rivals from birth, and trapping other potential heirs in the chilling confines of the caifs, the cage. The caifs, a luxurious but the isolated section of the Topkapi Palace, became the prison for royal princes who were not the direct heir. Here they lived in gilded isolation, sometimes for decades, denied education, forbidden from having children, their lives perpetually under threat. Their existence was a living death, a psychological torment designed to render them harmless, yet ready to be brought out and placed on the throne should the direct line die out. This system, while preventing mass fratricide, created emotionally stunted, often paranoid, rulers when they eventually emerged from the shadows of their confinement. The Ottoman Empire, built on conquest, ultimately solidified its succession through a policy of calculated, systematic internal violence. The very traditions of inheritance dissolved into an agonizing, self-destructive cycle of royal murder and perpetual imprisonment. And so, as the echoes of silenced cries and the whispers of silk cords fade into the silence of the Ottoman palace, and the phantom glint of the Sultan's power seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne bathed in the blood of its own kin. The Ottoman law of fratricide is a stark reminder that when power is absolute and stability is paramount, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder. In the long-forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those strangled princes truly haunt the gilded cages, their short lives forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence? A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood and silent prisons speak volumes, a testament to ruthless power and a chilling enigma of control. Chapter 22. The crisis of the 3rd century and the barracks emperors did the very heart of the Roman Empire truly devour its own rulers in a relentless, bloody feast of ambition, or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of a throne perpetually seized by the legions? A profound enigma of military succession consuming the very state it swore to protect. Our journey now takes us to one of the darkest, most chaotic periods in Roman history. The crisis of the 3rd century, from 235 CE to 284 CE, this wasn't merely a political crisis. It was a brutal, rapid-fire succession of rulers, known as the barracks emperors, each seizing the imperial purple through military might, only to be swiftly overthrown and violently extinguished, plunging Rome into an abyss of civil war, economic collapse, and relentless invasions. Our story begins with the assassination of Emperor Severus Alexander in 235 CE, marking the end of the Severon dynasty and ushering in an era of unprecedented instability. No clear line of succession, no established precedent. Beyond military acclamation led to generals in various provinces, backed by their legions, simply declared themselves emperor, launching civil wars against rivals and marching on Rome. Imagine the atmosphere across the vast Roman Empire, the constant rumble of distant legions on the march, the sudden arrival of new edicts from shifting imperial centers, the pervasive fear of civil war engulfing every province, the collapse of civil authority. The imperial throne, once a symbol of stability, became a death trap, beckoning ambitious men only to consume them. A macabre carousel of short reigns and violent ends. The chilling atmosphere of this crisis unfolded with breathtaking speed and brutality over a mere 49 years. Rome had at least 26 recognized emperors and many more pretenders, almost all of whom met violent deaths, assassinated by their own soldiers, killed in battle against rivals, or executed after defeat. Figures like Maximinus Thrax, a Thracian giant who rose from the ranks, Puppinus and Balbinus, co-emperors who hated each other and were murdered by the Praetorians, Gallienus, who endured civil wars and plague, and Aurelian, the restorer of the empire, eventually murdered by his own officers, illustrate this grim cycle. The empire fragmented, with independent Gallic and Palmyrene empires breaking away, further diminishing Rome's central authority. Economic collapse followed, with rampant inflation, debased coinage, and disrupted trade. Plague ravaged the population. Rome seemed on the brink of total annihilation, a profound disappearance of its imperial might. The unsettling climax of the crisis of the 3rd century was the profound, brutal precedent set by this fractured succession. Imperial power was now exclusively derived from military might. The Senate became a powerless rubber stamp, and lineage meant nothing. The emperor was simply the strongest general, capable of commanding loyalty through pay and plunder until a stronger general emerged. This period showed that the ultimate path to the purple was paved with the blood of rivals and the unwavering support of the legions. The cycle of violence created a devastating feedback loop. Civil wars weakened the empire's borders, allowing barbarian tribes to invade. Invasions necessitated more legions, which in turn increased the power of generals, leading to more coups. The very stability that military rule was meant to provide became its undoing, leaving a trail of death, economic ruin, and profound political instability. And so, as the echoes of endless battles and the whispers of 1,000 military coups fade into the silence, and the phantom glint of 100 daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne claimed by force and bathed in blood. The crisis of the 3rd century is a stark reminder that when military power is unbound by law or tradition, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder and chaos. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those fallen barracks emperors truly haunt the imperial roads? There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of an empire consuming itself. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 23. The assassination of King Edward II and the fiery poker did the very crown of England truly become a torment, consuming its wearer in a horrifying act of regicide, or was the brutal murder of King Edward II an inevitable consequence of profound weakness, a chilling enigma of a throne demanding the ultimate, agonizing sacrifice from its unworthy occupant? Our journey now takes us to the grim, cold stone walls of Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, England, to the chilling autumn night of September 21st, 1327. Here, a king, utterly despised by his queen and his nobles, met a brutal, horrifying end, a death so macabre that its very whisper has haunted English history for centuries, solidifying its place as one of the most brutal successions by force. Our story begins with King Edward II, who ascended the English throne in 1307 after the death of his formidable father, Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots. Unlike his warrior king father, Edward II was perceived as weak, effeminate, and deeply unpopular. He alienated his powerful barons by showering favour upon unpopular male favourites, notably Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger, granting them immense power and wealth. His military failures, particularly his crushing defeat at the Battle of Bannockburn against the Scots, further eroded his authority and solidified the hatred of his nobles. Imagine the atmosphere in England, the constant murmur of discontent among the powerful magnates, the simmering resentment in the court, the pervasive sense of a kingdom drifting rudderless under a king perceived as unfit to rule. The Queen, Isabella of France, herself a formidable and ambitious woman, felt increasingly marginalized and humiliated by her husband's favorites and his disdain. Her patience, and that of the realm, was wearing thin. The chilling atmosphere of Edward II's reign unfolded with increasing contempt and fear. Isabella eventually fled to France, where she formed a terrifying alliance with her lover, Roger Mortimer, a powerful, exiled baron. They invaded England in 1326, swiftly gaining support from the alienated nobility and commoners alike. Edward II found himself abandoned, his favourites quickly captured and brutally executed. He attempted to flee but was captured and imprisoned at Berkeley Castle. The nation watched as a queen and her lover effectively deposed a king, a shocking act of usurpation. The unsettling climax of Edward II's life came with his brutal, mysterious murder. While imprisoned, he was forced to abdicate in favour of his young son, Edward III. But for Isabella and Mortimer, a living, deposed king, no matter how weak, remained a threat, a potential rallying point for future opposition. The exact details of his death had been fiercely debated for centuries, shrouded in whispers and dark legend. The most infamous account, recorded by the chronicler Geoffrey the Baker, speaks of a horrifying method designed to leave no outward marks of violence. On that cold September night, it is said that a red-hot poker was thrust into his anus, burning his internal organs, causing immense, agonizing pain and death, but leaving no external sign of foul play. The screams of the king, echoing through the castle keep, were reportedly heard by villagers outside the walls, a chilling testament to the profound, unspeakable agony of his final moments. This barbaric method, if true, was a horrific combination of torture and assassination, a calculated act of cruelty designed to bypass traditional means of execution and conceal the murder. His brutal assassination, orchestrated by his own wife and her lover, was intended to secure the new regime and prevent any challenges to the young Edward III's throne. Instead, it cast a long, dark shadow over Isabella and Mortimer's rule, sowing seeds of discontent that would eventually lead to their own downfall. Edward III, upon reaching maturity, swiftly executed Mortimer and confined his mother, haunted by the memory of his father's death. Edward II's brutal end, born from weakness and desperate ambition, underscores the terrifying reality that imperial power, when perceived as unfit, could be extinguished by unspeakable violence, paving the way for a new, blood-stained succession. And so, as the echoes of his last desperate screams fade into the silence of Berkeley Castle and the phantom glow of a fiery poker seems to linger in the mind, we are left with a haunting legacy of a throne stained by unimaginable cruelty. The murder of King Edward II is a stark reminder that when perceived weakness meets ruthless ambition, it devours its own, transforming succession into a terrifying dance with grotesque torture. In the long-forgotten nights did the ghost of the king truly haunt his place of torment, his reign forever an unsolved enigma of tyranny and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of an agonizing, murdered king. The searing pain speaks volumes, a testament to unnatural cruelty and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 24. The Succession of Ivan. The Terrible and the Princess Staffdid, the very heart of Muscovy, truly devour its tyrannical ruler, his life consumed by madness, or was his brutal reign an inevitable consequence of unbound cruelty, a profound enigma of a throne demanding the ultimate, agonizing sacrifice from his own blood? Our journey now takes us to the vast, cold, and often brutal lands of Tsarist Russia, to the terrifying reign of Ivan IV Vasilievich, famously known as Ivan the Terrible, in the 16th century. His rule was a horrifying saga of paranoia, violence, and the systematic elimination of perceived threats, culminating in a chilling act of violence against his own heir, revealing the brutal nature of imperial succession under a madman's grip. Our story begins in 1533, when Ivan ascended the throne. As Grand Prince of Moscow at the tender age of 3, after the death of his father, his childhood was marked by violence, neglect, and the constant maneuvering of feuding Bojar noble families, instilling in him a deep paranoia and a profound mistrust of everyone. Upon reaching his majority, he centralized power with ruthless efficiency, breaking the power of the boyars, and in 1547 he crowned himself the first Tsar of all Russia, establishing a new, fearsome imperial authority. Imagine the atmosphere in the Kremlin, the whispers of fear, the terrified silence in the presence of the Tsar, the sudden, inexplicable executions, the pervasive sense of living under the whim of a madman. The Tsar, once a symbol of divine order, had become a source of unpredictable terror and profound cruelty. His reign was marked by the Aprokhanina, a brutal state policy of repression and terror, where special agents in black, mounted on black horses, ravaged the lands, torturing and executing thousands of boyars and commoners, confiscating their lands, and creating a reign of absolute fear. The chilling atmosphere of Ivan's reign unfolded with increasing horror and paranoia. He grew ever more tyrannical, believing himself infallible, and anyone who dared to question him, or even inadvertently offend him, faced unimaginable torture and death. His cruelty extended even to his own family. He suspected everyone, seeing conspiracies and betrayals where none existed. The unsettling climax of Ivan's life, and the brutal culmination of his paranoid reign, came in 1581 with a horrifying act of violence against his own beloved heir, Ivan Ivanovich, his eldest and most capable son. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, fueled by a heated argument, Ivan the Terrible struck his son repeatedly with his pointed staff. The blow was fatal. The Tsarevich, the direct successor to the throne, died a few days later from the head wound. The scene, whether in a private chamber or a public argument, would have been one of profound shock and horror. Witnessing the Tsar's unbound fury turning upon his own flesh and blood, his son's murder, a shocking act of royal patricide though, by a father against a son, was not intended to alter the succession, but rather was an accidental, yet tragic, consequence of Ivan's uncontrollable temper and profound mental instability. However, it had profound implications for the succession. It meant that the next in line was his younger, weaker, and possibly mentally impaired son, Fyodor. This ultimately led to the end of the Rurikid dynasty upon Fyodor's death and ushered in the tumultuous time of troubles, a period of profound dynastic crisis, famine, and foreign intervention that nearly destroyed Russia. The Tsar's brutal act against his own bloodline irrevocably scarred the course of Russian history. Ivan's brutal end and the tragic fate of his heir underscored the terrifying reality that imperial power, when wielded by a madman, could turn upon itself, consuming even the most sacred of bonds, paving the way for chaos and instability in its wake. And so, as the echoes of the Tsarevich's dying gasp fade into the silence of the Kremlin, and the phantom glint of the Tsar's staff lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne stained by unchecked madness and horrifying violence. The succession of Ivan the Terrible is a stark reminder that when absolute power descends into unbound tyranny, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with familial murder. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghost of the murdered Tsarevich truly haunt his father's final days? His short life forever an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a tyrant's self-inflicted wounds. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to madness and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 25. The murder of King Duncan and Macbeth's bloody ambush. Did the very crown of Scotland truly become a poisoned chalice, passing through a terrifying act of regicide? Or was the brutal murder of King Duncan an inevitable consequence of unchecked ambition, a profound enigma of a throne claimed by a terrifying prophecy and the chilling grip of a powerful warlord? Our journey now takes us to the windswept ancient battlegrounds of 11th century Scotland, a realm of fierce tribal loyalties, powerful warlords, and the ever-present threat of betrayal. Here, a historical king, Duncan I, was brutally murdered by his cousin, Macbeth, a powerful Mormere earl, an act that, while perhaps less dramatic than Shakespeare's version, was nevertheless a chilling testament to the brutal realities of royal succession in early medieval Scotland. Our story begins in 1034, when Duncan I, King of Alba, ascended the throne. He was a relatively young king, attempting to assert his authority over a fiercely independent and often unruly collection of Scottish lords and northern territories. His cousin, Macbeth, Mormaer of Moray, was a formidable figure, a seasoned warrior, and a man whose own claim to the throne, though indirect, was arguably stronger in some ways than Duncan's. Given the complicated system of succession known as tanistry, where the best candidate, not necessarily the eldest son, was chosen, imagine the atmosphere in Scotland, the constant murmur of clan rivalries, the shifting alliances, the pervasive tension beneath the veneer of royal authority. The crown, meant to symbolize unity, was often a prize to be fought for, its legitimacy decided by force of arms and the cunning of its claimants. The chilling atmosphere surrounding Duncan's reign unfolded with growing unease. His rule was not entirely successful. He suffered defeats against the Northumbrians, further eroding his authority. Macbeth, a powerful figure in the north, likely resented Duncan's perceived weakness and his attempts to impose centralized rule on the semi-independent regions. While Shakespeare's play depicts Macbeth as driven by supernatural prophecies and his ambitious wife, the historical reality was likely a more straightforward struggle for power. The unsettling climax of Duncan's life came in 1040. He led an army north, likely to assert his authority over Moray Macbeth's territory. Instead of a decisive victory, he met his end. The historical accounts are less dramatic than Shakespeare's midnight dagger in a castle bed, but no less brutal. Duncan was killed in battle, or immediately after a battle, near Elgin. The assassin was Macbeth himself. This was a clear act of regicide, a direct challenge to the established monarch, and a bloody means of seizing the throne. Macbeth then became King of Scots, reigning for 17 years, a surprisingly long and relatively stable period for the time. He was, by many accounts, a capable ruler, patronizing the church and even making a pilgrimage to Rome. But his ascent was founded on the brutal murder of his predecessor, a chilling precedent that echoed through the volatile politics of medieval Scotland. His reign, though stable, was ultimately cut short when Duncan's son, Malcolm Threescore, returned from exile with English support and killed Macbeth in battle in 1057, restoring his family to the throne. The murder of Duncan and Macbeth's subsequent usurpation underscored the terrifying reality that in early medieval Scotland, imperial succession was often a matter of who could seize and hold power by force, a brutal dance of ambition and violence that made the crown a perilous prize. And so, as the echoes of clashing swords and the whispers of ancient prophecies fade into the silence of the Scottish Highlands, and the phantom glint of a blood-stained crown seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne claimed by murder. Macbeth's bloody ambition is a stark reminder that when power is pursued with ruthless cunning, it devours its own, transforming succession into a terrifying dance with regicide. In the long forgotten nights, did the ghost of King Duncan truly haunt the battlefields of Scotland? His reign forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of royal succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a king's violent end. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ambition and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 26. The Imperial Assassinations of the Sepron dynasty and the price of dynastic control did the very foundation of an imperial dynasty, seemingly secured by ruthless cunning, truly crumble under the weight of its own internal violence? Or were the brutal assassinations within the Severan family an inevitable consequence of power wielded without moral restraint, a profound enigma of a throne, demanding the ultimate price from its own bloodline. Our journey now takes us to the opulent, yet increasingly paranoid and blood-soaked courts of the Roman Empire, to the early 3rd century CE. Here, the Severan dynasty, founded by Septimius Severus, sought to establish a new era of stability after years of civil war. Instead, it became a chilling saga of internecine conflict, fratricide, and familial murder, revealing the horrifying price of dynastic control. Our story begins in 193 CE, with the powerful general Septimius Severus seizing the imperial throne. After years of brutal civil war, his motto was, "Make the soldiers rich and scorn all other men," indicating his understanding that military loyalty was the true key to power. He established his dynasty, naming his 2 sons, Caracalla and Geta, as conquerors, intending for them to rule together, but the seeds of destruction were sown in their very upbringing. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial palace, the whispers of sibling rivalry, the rustle of silken robes concealing dark plots, the pervasive fear that even within the emperor's own family, no one was truly safe. Caracalla and Geta from childhood harbored a bitter hatred for each other, constantly bickering and competing for their father's favor. Their relationship, meant to be a foundation of unity, became a ticking time bomb. The chilling atmosphere of their quarrel unfolded with pervasive terror. Upon their father's death in 211 CE, Caracalla and Geta became emperors, but their mutual animosity was so profound that they divided the imperial palace between them, living in constant fear of assassination from the other. Their mother, Julia Domna, desperately tried to mediate, but to no avail. The empire held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Bloody confrontation, the unsettling climax of the Severan dynasty's internal conflict, came swiftly and brutally in 211 CE. Caracalla, utterly consumed by ambition and a terrifying jealousy, orchestrated the murder of his own brother, Geta, luring Geta to their mother's apartment for a supposed reconciliation. Caracalla's Praetorian guards burst in and slaughtered Geta in his mother's arms. Caracalla then initiated a brutal purge, executing thousands of Geta supporters, and even ordering a damnatio memorio, the erasure of Geta's name and image from all public records. A chilling attempt to vanish his brother from history, but the cycle of violence did not end there. Caracalla himself became increasingly paranoid and tyrannical, launching brutal purges and expensive military campaigns. His reign of terror ultimately ended in 217 CE, when he was assassinated by a disgruntled Praetorian prefect, Macronus. The dynasty continued its violent implosion with the subsequent rise and fall of Elagabalus and Severus Alexander, both young, ineffective emperors manipulated by powerful women and eventually murdered by their own soldiers. The Severan dynasty, born from military might, ultimately devoured itself through internal violence, lasting barely 40 years. The imperial assassinations within the Severan family underscored the terrifying reality that imperial power, when wielded without moral restraint and consumed by familial hatred, could lead to a self-destructive spiral of violence, paving the way for further chaos and instability in the broader empire. The pursuit of dynastic control through ruthless means ultimately destroyed the very family it sought to elevate. And so, as the echoes of Geta's dying screams fade into the silence of the Roman palace, and the phantom glint of 1,000 daggers lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne stained by fratricide. The Severan assassinations are a stark reminder that when absolute power descends into unbound tyranny, It devours its own, transforming succession into a terrifying dance with familial murder. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of murdered brothers truly haunt the imperial chambers? Their lives forever an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to unnatural cruelty and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 27. The Assassination of Tsar Paul I and the Silken Scarf did the very heart of the Russian Empire truly devour its eccentric ruler. His life extinguished in a horrifying act of aristocratic conspiracy, or was his brutal assassination an inevitable consequence of unchecked tyranny, a profound enigma of an imperial throne demanding the ultimate, suffocating sacrifice for its survival? Our journey now takes us to the vast, cold, and often brutal lands of Tsarist Russia, to the early 19th century, a time of profound political tension and simmering resentment against an increasingly despotic monarch. Here Tsar Paul I, a capricious and paranoid ruler, met a brutal end at the hands of his own nobles, a chilling testament to the dangers of imperial madness and a chilling example of forced succession. Our story begins in 1796, when Paul I ascended the Russian throne after the death of his formidable mother, Catherine the Great. Having been kept largely isolated and excluded from power during his mother's long reign, Paul harbored deep resentments and a profound mistrust of the nobility. He quickly reversed many of his mother's liberal policies, introducing strict military discipline, arbitrary decrees, and a pervasive atmosphere of fear and surveillance. His behavior grew increasingly erratic, his paranoia profound, and his temper violent. Imagine the atmosphere in the opulent Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, the hushed whispers of discontent among the powerful nobility, the terrified silence in the presence of the Tsar, the sudden, inexplicable exiles and imprisonment of courtiers, the pervasive sense of living under the whim of a madman. The Tsar, once a symbol of stability and order, had become a source of unpredictable terror and profound cruelty, perceived as a threat to the very stability of the empire. Conspiracies, a viper in the heart of power, began to coil among the highest ranks of the aristocracy and the military, many of whom feared for their own lives and fortunes. The chilling atmosphere of Paul I's reign unfolded with increasing horror. He antagonized nearly everyone: the military, the bureaucracy, the nobility, and even his own family. His unpredictable foreign policy, which swung wildly between alliances with France and England, further destabilized the empire. His increasingly despotic decrees and his open disdain for the established order made his removal seem a matter of urgent necessity for the survival of the state. The unsettling climax of Paul I's life came on the night of March 23, 1801, a conspiracy involving highly placed nobles, military officers including Governor-General of St. Petersburg Peter von der Pollen, and even supported by his own son and heir, Grand Duke Alexander, who allegedly gave implicit consent for his father's removal, though not for his murder, burst into the Tsar's bedchamber in the newly built Mikhailovsky Castle. The scene was one of brutal, desperate violence. The conspirators attempted to force Paul to sign an abdication document. When he resisted, a struggle ensued. He was struck, knocked to the floor, and ultimately strangled to death with a silken scarf. His death was brutal, intimate, and desperate. A final, horrifying act to remove a tyrant who had become unbearable. His brutal assassination, a horrific act of regicide orchestrated by his own disillusioned nobility, was intended to bring immediate relief and restore stability to the empire. Instead, it merely highlighted the profound vulnerability of the imperial office to internal plots when a ruler lost the support of the powerful elite. While his son, Alexander I, swiftly ascended to the throne, his reign was forever overshadowed by the chilling knowledge of his father's violent end and his own ambiguous role in the conspiracy. The murders set a terrifying precedent that even the Tsar could be removed by force when his reign became intolerable. Paul I's brutal end, born from desperate ambition and tyranny, underscored the terrifying reality that imperial power, when wielded by a madman, could only be extinguished by violence, paving the way for a new, blood-stained succession. And so, as the echoes of his last desperate gasp fade into the silence of his imperial bedchamber, and the phantom glint of a silken scarf lingers in the mind, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne stained by madness and violent removal. The assassination of Tsar Paul I is a stark reminder that when absolute power descends into unbound tyranny, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those he tormented truly haunt his final moments? His short reign forever an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a tyrant's abrupt end. The suffocating scarf speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 28. The Rise of Empress Wu Zetian and the harem's iron hand did the very core of imperial China truly transform into a terrifying stage for ruthless ambition, where a woman from the secluded harem could seize the dragon throne. Or was the astonishing ascent of Empress Wu Zetian an inevitable consequence of profound cunning, a profound enigma of succession ruled by an iron hand and a trail of silenced rivals? Our journey now takes us to the glittering, yet utterly ruthless, courts of 7th century Tang dynasty China, a period of immense cultural flourishing and profound political intrigue. Here, a formidable woman, Wu Zetian, rose from a low-ranking concubine to become the absolute ruler of China, reigning as Empress Regnant, orchestrating a brutal succession through cunning, terror, and the systematic elimination of all who stood in her way. Our story begins with Wu's entry into the imperial harem as a concubine to Emperor Taizong. After his death, she entered a Buddhist nunnery, a common fate for concubines without heirs. However, her intelligence and beauty caught the eye of Taizong's successor, his son, Emperor Gozong. She returned to the palace, swiftly rising through the ranks, eliminating rivals including Gozong's empress and chief concubine, and eventually becoming empress. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial palace, the hushed whispers of envy and fear, the rustle of silk concealing desperate plots, the sweet scent of exotic perfumes masking the pervasive fear of Empress Wu's intelligence and ruthlessness. Gaozong suffered from various ailments, and Wu began to exercise increasing power, making decisions behind the scenes, effectively ruling through him. Upon his death, she became Empress, Dowager, and Regent for her young sons. But her ambition was far greater. She desired the dragon throne itself, a position never before held by a woman in her own right. The chilling atmosphere of Wu's ascent unfolded with pervasive terror and cunning. She systematically eliminated any who dared to challenge her authority or stand in the way of her ultimate goal. Her opponents, whether imperial relatives, powerful officials, or even her own children, mysteriously disappeared, were exiled, or brutally executed on trumped-up charges. She used spies and secret police to root out dissent, creating a climate of pervasive fear. Her two sons, who briefly held the throne, were easily manipulated and eventually deposed or exiled, deemed too weak or too defiant. Her most chilling acts included the alleged murder of her own infant daughter to frame a rival, and the brutal silencing of any who resisted her relentless drive for power. The unsettling climax of Wu Zetian's reign was the profound, brutal precedent she set for imperial succession, openly seizing the Dragon Throne in 690 CE, proclaiming her own Zhou dynasty, temporarily displacing the Temps. She ruled with an iron hand for 15 years, proving to be a highly competent, albeit ruthless, administrator. She promoted talented commoners over entrenched aristocrats, expanded the empire, and fostered a period of relative peace and prosperity. But her path to power was paved with the bodies of her rivals, her family, and anyone who questioned her. Ultimate authority, her usurpation, a shocking and unprecedented act, irreversibly altered the understanding of imperial succession in China. She proved that power could be seized by sheer will and cunning, regardless of traditional gender roles or established lineage. Her reign, though brief, left a permanent mark on the history of Chinese succession, demonstrating the lengths to which ambition could drive even the most unlikely of claimants. And so, as the echoes of silenced rivals and the whispers of 1,000 intrigues fade into the silence of the Chinese palace, and the phantom glint of the Empress's gaze seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne ruled by an iron hand. The ascent of Empress Wu Zetian is a stark reminder that when power is pursued with unbridled ambition, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder and usurpation. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those she eliminated truly haunt her imperial chambers? Their lives forever an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence. A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a woman who dared to seize the ultimate power. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ruthless power and a chilling enigma of ambition. Chapter 29. The Mongol succession and the blood of the Khans revisited for brutal successions. Did the vast, conquering Mongol Empire truly devour its own leaders in a relentless, bloody feast of ambition and fratricide? Or was it a terrifying, inevitable consequence of power to immense, a profound enigma of imperial succession consuming the very dynasty that forged it, tearing apart its own heart in a brutal dance of internal conflict? Our journey now takes us to the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia, to the heart of the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in history. Here, after the death of its legendary founder, Genghis Khan, the process of choosing his successors became a brutal, often horrifying, saga of internal power struggles, assassinations, and devastating civil wars, tearing at the very fabric of an empire built on conquest. Our story begins with Genghis Khan, a military genius who united the disparate Mongol tribes in the early 13th century, creating an unstoppable force that swept across Asia and into Europe. He established a clear line of succession, intending for his vast empire to be passed down through his descendants, the Golden Family. But his death in 1227, and the sheer immensity of the empire, quickly exposed the inherent fragility of this system, particularly when ambitious sons and grandsons, each with their own loyal armies and vast territories, began to eye the ultimate prize, the title of Great Khankagan, supreme ruler of the Mongol world. Imagine the atmosphere in the sprawling Mongol encampments, the constant rumble of countless horse hooves, the chilling cries of battle echoing across the plains, the sudden, terrifying shifts in allegiance among powerful generals and princes, the pervasive fear of a Khan's wrath. The vast empire, once unified by Genghis's singular will, became a battleground for his own descendants. The traditional succession councils, the Kurultai, meant to ensure a peaceful transfer of power through the selection of the most capable heir, instead often became tense, protracted affairs, fraught with intrigue, political maneuvering, and the constant, unspoken threat of violence. The chilling atmosphere of this succession unfolded with breathtaking speed and profound brutality. The struggle for the title of Great Khan often led to open warfare among the heirs, brothers and cousins battling each other for supremacy. Ogedei Khan, Genghis's third son, succeeded him, but his death in 1241 led to a long and contentious interregnum as various factions jockeyed for position. The election of Gayat Khan in 1246, and later Mungaya Khan in 1251, involved ruthless political maneuvering, purges, and the often violent elimination of rivals. Supporters of defeated claimants were executed, their families dispossessed, their very names erased. The most infamous and destructive period of succession came after Mungik's death in 1259, plunging the empire into a devastating civil war. Known as the Toluids' Civil War, between his brothers Kublai Khan and Arik Baker, this was not just a squabble for local power. It was a bloody, brutal conflict fought across vast distances, draining imperial resources and ultimately dividing the empire irrevocably. Thousands died, cities were ravaged, and the once unified vision of Genghis Khan began to shatter. The unsettling climax of Mongolian succession was the profound, brutal precedent set by its relentless cycle of violence and fragmentation. While Kublai eventually triumphed, establishing the Yuan dynasty in China and becoming Great Khan, his victory marked the effective fracturing of the once unified Mongol Empire into separate, often warring Khanates. The dream of a single, unified empire under one Great Khan dissolved into a terrifying reality of fratricide, assassination, and regional power struggles. Brothers murdered brothers, cousins fought cousins, all driven by the insatiable thirst for the ultimate imperial title, turning the Golden Family into a source of internal destruction. The empire, built on conquest, ultimately struggled to conquer itself, its immense vastness, its inherent decentralization into semi-independent Ulus fiefdoms, and the boundless ambitions of Genghis's powerful descendants proved to be its undoing. The golden lineage, meant to ensure a smooth transition, instead became a source of endless, bloody conflict, leading to the gradual weakening and eventual dissolution of the unified empire into fractured successor states, each pursuing its own destiny. And so, as the echoes of galloping hooves and the whispers of 1,000 betrayals fade into the silence of the vast steppes, and the phantom glint of a Khan's blood-stained scimitar seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of an empire consumed by its own ambition. Mongolian succession, with its ritualized violence and pervasive fratricide, is a stark reminder that when power is absolute and boundless, it devours its own transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with murder and endless war. In the long-forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those slain khans truly haunt the steppes. There reigns forever an unsolved enigma of ambition and chilling violence, a chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of a fragmented empire. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to chaos and a chilling enigma of power. Chapter 30. The Imperial Purges of Ancient China and the Mandate of Heaven's Wrath did. The very notion of imperial unity truly demand a terrifying ocean of blood, purging all dissent and eliminating any perceived threat. Or was the ruthless consolidation of power by China's emperors an inevitable consequence of unbound ambition, a profound enigma of a throne demanding unimaginable cruelty and the systematic obliteration of opposition? Our journey now takes us to the vast ancient lands of Imperial China, a civilization forged by dynasties and unified by the concept of the mandate of heaven, where the transfer of power, whether by succession or usurpation, was frequently accompanied by terrifying purges, massacres, and the systematic elimination of perceived rivals, leaving behind a haunting legacy of profound political violence. Our story begins not with a single event, but with a recurring pattern throughout China's long imperial history, from the Qin dynasty onward. While the mandate of heaven theoretically legitimized a dynasty's rule, its practical application often involved brutal power struggles, especially during periods of transition or internal weakness. Emperors, empress dowagers, powerful eunuchs, or ambitious ministers all vied for control and the elimination of rivals, often through horrifying means, became a chillingly common feature of imperial succession. Our story begins not with a single event, but with a recurring pattern throughout China's long imperial history, from the Qin dynasty onward. While the mandate of heaven theoretically legitimized a dynasty's rule, its practical application often involved brutal power struggles, especially during periods of transition or internal weakness. Emperors, empress dowagers, powerful eunuchs, or ambitious ministers all vied for control and the elimination of rivals, often through horrifying means, became a chillingly common feature of imperial succession. Imagine the atmosphere in the Forbidden City, the constant murmur of court intrigue, the rustle of silken robes concealing daggers, the sweet scent of incense masking the pervasive fear of imperial wrath. The emperor's throne, though seemingly absolute, was often precarious, defended by a ruthless inner circle and maintained through a constant vigilance against plots and rebellions. Any challenge, real or imagined, was met with terrifying swiftness. The chilling atmosphere of imperial purges unfolded with pervasive terror. History is replete with examples across dynasties. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, famously buried scholars alive and burned books to solidify his rule. The Han dynasty saw ruthless empress dowagers like Empress L systematically eliminate rivals, including members of her own family, to secure power for her clan. In the Tang dynasty, Empress Wu Zetian, as we have seen, climbed to the pinnacle of power by ordering the murders of her own relatives and loyal ministers. Later dynasties, like the Ming, saw emperors like the Yongle Emperor ascend through a brutal civil war against his nephew, followed by massive purges and the execution of thousands of perceived loyalists to the deposed emperor, often extended to their entire families for 3 generations. The treason case of the Literary Inquisition under the Qing dynasty resulted in thousands of intellectuals being executed or exiled for perceived disloyalty. The unsettling climax of imperial purges was the profound, brutal precedent they set. For succession, absolute control maintained through terrifying massacres and the systematic obliteration of opposition. The goal was not just to remove a rival, but to utterly extinguish their lineage, their faction, and their very memory, ensuring no future challenge could arise. This often meant the execution of entire families, including women and children, a practice known as extermination of the 3 kindreds or 9 kindreds. The methods were cruel: poisoning, strangulation, dismemberment, or even slow, agonizing deaths. This pervasive fear and ruthlessness, while sometimes ensuring stability for a time, also created deep-seated resentment and paranoia, leading to further conspiracies and rebellions. The very stability that absolute power sought to achieve was often undermined by the brutal means used to maintain it. Succession, whether dynastic or usurped, became a terrifying game of survival, where the penalty for losing was often the extermination of one's entire bloodline. And so, as the echoes of silenced cries and the whispers of 1,000 executions fade into the silence of the imperial palace, and the phantom glint of the emperor's arbitrary wrath seems to shimmer in the darkness, we are left with the haunting legacy of a throne bathed in blood. The imperial purges of ancient China are a stark reminder that when power is pursued with unbridled ambition, it devours its own, transforming leadership into a terrifying dance with mass murder and systematic terror. In the long, forgotten nights, did the ghosts of those silently executed truly haunt the imperial chambers, their lives forever an unsolved enigma of unchecked ambition and chilling violence? A chilling lullaby from a time when the very act of imperial succession became a terrifying, brutal spectacle, leaving behind only the profound silence of profound evil. The spilled blood speaks volumes, a testament to ruthless power and a chilling enigma of control.